Hello and welcome to Adventures Gone Mad, your critical look at D&D books. My name is Kyle W, and I am here with my favoritist co-host.
Hey, it's Kyle A. How's it going?
How's it going, Kyle?
Well, let's see. We just got back from Palm Springs, and we finally met a person that we had been playing games with for 5 years in person for the first time, which was pretty exciting. I think it's 6 years, actually. I'm not sure. It was a long time.
It was about, I want to say 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
So...
That's a lot more. That's like 9 years.
Yeah, it's closer to 10, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is I know the 2016 election happened when we were playing Storm King's Thunder, and that was like the campaign right before you joined.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe 2016, 2017?
Yeah.
I don't know. I could figure it out.
So 2018 was when I joined, I believe, because that's when I had my condo. So.
Okay. It was 2018.
Yeah.
Huh. Maybe we played for longer than I thought before you joined.
Yeah.
But anyways, so we have an online D&D group that we have been playing consistently with for a really long time. That group of people we have met through other various means. We have seen most of the people through that group except one of them. And we all decided to do a kind of weekend thing in Palm Springs because it's like really sunny this time of year, and we both live in the Pacific Northwest, which is dull and dreary this time of year. So we wanted to get some sun.
Yeah, and we wanted to go to some place that's very gay, which is Palm Springs, and also have a nice gay time with gay people who are gay. So
yep. So yeah, a lot of homosexual individuals live in Palm Springs. So yeah. There was a lot of our friends and people that we know were actually there. So
yeah, the running joke was I was talking to my friends, and they were like, yeah, so when I was younger, we were all like, Palm Springs is a bunch of old people, and now we're the old people, so now we want to go there.
Yeah, I don't think that has changed. I was definitely thinking about, as I was boarding my plane, like the median age of the people that work at the airport versus the median age of the people that work at the airport, the other airports that I see, and there's definitely a noticeable difference.
For sure.
But it's a pretty interesting city. Definitely a place that I like to visit. I grew up in the desert, so it's kind of like a little bit of nostalgia for me to see mountains that look the way that they do in Palm Springs, and the type of desert plants and stuff that I grew up around. So that was nice to see again.
And also you're sort of going back to, you're sort of understanding why when you live here and you go there, why it's a desirable place to live. At least to visit.
Yeah, so I've been in Portland long enough to where my relationship to the sun has changed. When I moved here from Arizona, I loved the weather. I loved that it was gray and the sun doesn't come out, and it was like raining all the time. That was like amazing, because where I grew up, the sun tries to kill you.
Right.
It's just the biggest enemy that you have is the sun. Like you avoid going outside because there's too much sun. The sun will burn you because there's too much sun. Like the sun is the biggest enemy where I lived. So, I'd always look forward to winter, or, a nice day in Arizona is one where it is overcast and the sun is not out. So when I moved to a place where that is always the case, to me, that was like, oh, well, every day is nice here. But now that I've been here a couple of years, I have acclimated and, have a different relationship with the sun now.
Yeah, yeah. And I've lived here since 2013 in the Pacific Northwest. And I grew up in a not sunny place in Humboldt County in Northern California, where it's foggy. It's the foggiest airport in the entire world. And seeing the sun was always a great thing. And then I lived in Arizona, and the sun was there all the time, and I got really tired of that. So it's nice to go and visit the sun every once in a while.
It was very surprising when I stepped out into the Palm Springs airport, which is a very unique airport because it's half outside.
Right.
So they do that on purpose, I guess. But you walk out of your plane and you walk outside, and I was just like, oh wow, like this feels different than what I'm used to.
Right.
Previously, I would have been like, oh man, the sun's out. This sucks. I don't want to be in the sun.
And now it's like, well, I want to absorb all the sunlight. I was out in the sun every single day, trying to absorb as much of the radiation as possible.
So yeah, that was a fun vacation. We played some games. So we got to play. We played Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Always a fun time with that Dungeon Crawl Classics. I had 3 characters survive this time.
We are advocates of Dungeon Crawl Classics on this podcast. We love that. We love Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Yeah, and your D&D game was super fun. I had a great time with that.
Yeah, and I ran a kind of one-shot D&D game, although it was more of a like 3-shot, but we kind of ran out of time, and scheduling stuff didn't work out. But it was essentially a one-shot that I made that was based on like shonen anime, and had like a lot of anime tropes.
Yeah, it was great.
And it was my first in-person D&D game since COVID.
Oh, right.
That I have run. It was kind of like interesting playing in person again and being like, oh yeah, there's certain things that playing online is way faster than playing in person, and certain things in person that is way faster than playing online and way different.
Right, yeah. My rolling craziness continued, so that's fun. It was like, okay, how many natural 20s did I get this time? Oh, geez, what is going on?
Yeah, our my co-host here is talented in rolling dice.
It used to not be that way. I used to just have the worst luck rolling dice. I just was terrible at it. My old friends in any gaming group I had said, well, if there's any roll in which Kyle has to survive, he will basically fail it. So that is usually the case. Now I just roll a natural 20, and it's crazy, and I don't understand it. So yeah, that's a thing now.
Yeah, it's just the bell curve coming back to like balance out from all the bad rolls when you were younger. I think that's how statistics works.
Yeah, that's exactly how that works. Yeah, no, that's exactly how that works.
Yeah, so every time you roll a 1, you have a 20 coming. That's how I learned that in my statistics class.
Sure. Yeah, I have a math degree. That's not what I learned, but that's okay.
I did talk to a biologist at a bar once who told me that statistics is not math.
Okay. I mean, that's a thing that someone said. So, sure.
Well, it was me mentioning that statistics was my favorite math class that I took. And he was like, that's because statistics isn't really math. And I was like, I don't understand this, but sure.
Yeah, okay, sir. I mean,
I think it was he doesn't like statistics. I don't know, whatever. So moving on. So today we're going to be talking about Against the Giants. Against the Giants is a kind of a weird one. It is a compilation of 3 different modules. The first one being G1, Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. G2, Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. And G3, Hall of the Fire Giant King. Those are all combined into like one continuous, semi-continuous adventure in Against the Giants.
Yeah, I chose this one because I remember it fondly, and after reading it, I don't. I don't remember it fondly.
Yeah, so when you say you remember it fondly, what was your experience with it? Did you actually play it?
I only played the first. We got to the hall. Well, we got to the fire giant. The hill giant's hall. I remember that, and we didn't die or anything. We just didn't finish or anything. And like we started the fight, and I think we just got called away and didn't do anything else. But the parts that I remember fondly is I remember buying the module, being super excited to open it, and then looking at it and not really reading it because I was, I don't know, 10 or something, and mostly just looking at all the pictures, reading some of the literature, some of it in there, and going, oh, this is so cool. Like, there's 3 modules here, and oh, this is going to be so awesome. But that's because I was 10 or something, and thinking it was really neat, and really wanting to play this series of modules with someone, which I never could really get anybody to do. We sort of got through the first part of it, and I think part of it was that like we were using our own characters, and our own characters weren't high enough level to play in this and survive. So,
oh yeah, that's gonna make it pretty hard when giant hits you when you die instantly, or you can't kill them because they have like 50 HP.
Right. So that was another thing too.
Yeah, and my experience with this is I've heard about Against the Giants. Like, it's definitely like a classic module. So it's always been a like kind of, just wanted to see what was about. Like, I know the basic premise because I've played Storm King's Thunder, which is like loosely based on this. And I read a little bit of the Tales of the Yawning Portal 5e adaptation of this adventure. I did run like half of Tales of the Yawning Portal, and we switched to a different game when we were about to do Against the Giants.
Okay.
So I never actually ran it. So all I knew is that it's an adventure about giants, and it's like a bunch of different containers with different giant types. So I knew there was like a fire giant like dungeon and an ice giant dungeon and I think hill giant dungeon.
Right.
So Against the Giants was the Origin 79 tournament module. I did try to find the tournament module rules. I could not find them. I don't know if they exist on the internet, like the original ones. It was released. So the three initial modules, G1, G2, and G3, came out in like the late 70s and then were compiled into Against the Giants in 1981. The main author is Gary Gygax, and at that time, this is going to be the same as our previous episode, but the most popular movie is Raiders of the Lost Ark. The most popular album is High Fidelity by REO Speedwagon, and the most popular video game is Pac-Man. Some other credits on here. So the design is Gary Gygax. The editing is Mike Carr, Timothy Jones, John Pickens, and Lawrence Schick. And Lawrence Schick is a name that you might have heard before or might recognize. He is still kind of doing gaming stuff. He was the principal narrative designer in a game you might have heard of called Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, wow. I did not. That's cool.
And there's a bunch of different artists on this credited. So there's David C. Sutherland III, David A. Trampier, Jeff D., David S. LaForce, Errol Otis, and Bill Willingham.
Three Davids,
although, yeah, exactly. But, we learned from our last podcast that if you go by David, you have to go by a different name.
Yeah, there's too many Davids.
And Gary Gygax did leave TSR in like 1985 sometime, so this was like not too far away from that. This was in 1980. This compilation came out in 1981. And this release I noted is around the same time the revision of Basic Expert by Moldvay and Zeb Cook came out. So I just wanted to know that was probably part of that whole push.
So I want to talk about the art just a little bit because 10-year-old Kyle, when he got this module and opened it up and looked at all this art, I was just kind of blown away and really excited. Because we didn't have a lot of visual references for things. And I did a little deep dive on some of these artists. So the cover, if you look, is done by Bill Willingham. And Bill Willingham has done a ton of really cool work. If you go on, just on his Wikipedia site, there's he's been in obviously tons of D&D stuff, but he also did a comic book called Elementals, which in the 80s was a massive. I remember being in the comic book store and everyone just being really gaga over Elementals. It's drawn really, really well. I would check it out if you can. It has what everyone was so impressed with in 1980 was that there was so much gore in it for a comic book, and you didn't see that amount of like sort of violence and gore in a comic book. Sort of mainstream. It wasn't DC or anything. It was published by Comico, so they could sort of get away with that sort of thing. But, it was very, different than what people had seen before. So like his cover, if you've ever seen it, is this just black with, all of the giants represented, and there's a woman and she's like screaming and with a little baby and there's a hellhound and people are getting thrown. It's great. It was a really super fun thing to see. And then, the very first page is probably my favorite favorite D&D artist of all time, which is Jeff D. And Jeff D has a very, like, his style is very much like a bunch of superheroes. So you sort of get this idea that, like, oh, these are all superheroes that are going to go into this dungeon and, you know, it's going to be super great. It was always just, you know, always really impressed, you know, by that stuff.
Yeah, and I really like the art on the first page of the book, right when you open the cover. And I would define this art style as like really clean.
Yeah.
It's just the lines are really clean.
You know, if you look at it, it's sort of like Layfield before Layfield. If you're in a comic book thing, you know, these sort of clean lines with very muscular looking, you know, characters, well-defined, you know, anatomy, you know, really, really well done, in my opinion. He's my favorite artist. He did Village of Vigilantes, and that was, you know, he did all the art for that, and in the art for all that, it's all superheroes, and it's super cool. I really, really love that art. You know, when I was a little kid, I was trying to mimic these artists with my own, taking stuff and painting it or drawing it, and you know, I really, really loved it. The other artists are really, I mean, Errol Otis is in there, which I think we've talked about before, but the one that I really want to talk about that's
he's a classic,
really interesting, that I think everybody sort of recognizes as like the, you know, one of the artists, is Dave Trampier. Dave Trampier, so if you look in the book, I think his first example of something is on page 5 with the kitchen, the kitchen hill giants. And then he also did, on page, let me find it. Page 12 is the Rimmeraz, which is fantastic. You know, it's a very distinctive art style from him. He also did,
yeah, and it looks like, I'm just looking, yeah, a lot of at least in the kitchen, like a lot of cross hatching. So even in this black and white book, you get a sense of like where light is hitting.
So, you know, so on our Discord, we don't really have a Discord yet. We do have a Discord, but you use that the Lich picture. That's his picture.
Yes.
Yeah. And so he's a really interesting character. He also designed a game called Titan, which I didn't know, and is one of my favorite games.
Oh, he designed that,
yeah,
or just the art?
No, he designed Titan. I didn't know that he had designed that, and that is one of my favorite board games. And I hardly ever play it anymore, but it's totally fun. He co-designed it with Jason McAllister, so I don't want to say he only did it, but they basically co-designed the whole thing, and he did all the art for it. And you know, the art on that is really cool. It's always like a really cool thing to see. Now, he is an interesting character because he basically, at some point in time, and I think because he was so disgruntled with TSR, he stopped completely drawing, doing any art whatsoever, and became a taxi driver. So he just disappeared from everybody. People thought that he died. He wasn't. Wow. He would get checks from basically TSR, and he wouldn't cash them, so they thought he was dead. And basically, he reappeared in 2002 because someone took his taxi cab and figured out who he was and made the connection. And people hounded him, going like, "Man, like, we've been trying to find you. You are literally like some of people's favorite artists." And he's like, "I want nothing to do with any of you people. Like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to deal with any of you people." He had such a bad experience with TSR that he didn't want to talk to any of them. And he wow. He finally, when he was having problems with his health, he finally started to talk to people about trying to get some money because he couldn't drive a taxi anymore. And he was having, you know, he was having all these cancer problems, and he didn't even know that Wizards of the Coast had bought out TSR. He had no idea.
Wow.
And then, you know, people were just so excited because he was going to like start selling his artwork and showing his artwork again. And then he died. So it's also quite tragic, but you know, he did know and find out that, you know, people really, really gravitated and loved his art, and were just excited about it. So he's a really interesting character, and you know, to this day, you know, when you know, he also did the cover of the Player's Handbook, the old school Player's Handbook. That was his artwork. So yeah, he's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's like it's interesting because I'm looking at his art right now, as you mentioned. I'm looking at the kitchen photo that he has in the kitchen art that he has on page 5, And yeah, like there's a bunch of cross hatching, so you get like a sense of where the light is hitting, and it even like you can see the grain on the table that is also cross hatching, but it's different than the lighting, and you can tell just by like looking at it. So like that's really unfortunate that such a like talented guy was so burned out that he basically stopped.
Yeah.
And going from our last podcast where we kind of went into Zeb Cook's background a little bit, it is not surprising that going from working at TSR to a taxi driver was probably a pay boost.
Yeah,
because they did not pay well. They did not pay well there, at least for their designers. I don't know about their artists. It might have been even worse.
No, and I think he was they talk about how a lot of that artwork, there's all this original artwork that they all did, and it all got thrown away later, and I'm sure that they're all super bitter about how much of that art they get credited and don't get credited for. And but 10-year-old Kyle, like when I looked at this art, obviously I gravitated towards like Willingham and Errol Otis and David Trampier. All of these artists were just such a revelation to me that like somehow, they were able to do this art. I just assumed that they were doing really, really well and and had lots of money doing that stuff. But, obviously we know differently now.
Yeah, you just kind of assume that, they're doing a thing and they're talented. They're getting compensated well for it. But unfortunately, that isn't always how it works. And yeah, the art in here is kind of really brings like these early modules alive. Otherwise, it would just be typing on a page. And especially these early modules, there's not really like the description for a lot of these rooms can be very dry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we should talk about that. As I said, I remember this module fondly, and now I'm not that fond of it anymore. So I guess we should get into it.
Yeah, so we were kind of talking before this a little bit before we started recording. Like we were both like a little surprised by the reading of this module, being it's like very. We'll get into it as we're going through. A little bit. The word I would use is stale.
Yeah.
It's just very dry. In Caves of Chaos. The other Gary Gygax adventure that we've done on this podcast, the Keep on the Borderlands with the Caves of Chaos and the Keep, is kind of written in the same style, but the Keep in Keep of the Borderlands like really kind of carries that adventure, and that's kind of what it is about, and not really the Caves of Chaos. This module is just the Caves of Chaos for like 30 pages.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
In a way,
there's just not a lot of flavor. There's not a lot of like, hey. I mean, he does mention that it's sort of like, well, you need to bring your creativity. I'm just giving you a straw plan, and this is just, you need to bring your own creativity to this whole thing. So it's like, you read this, and then you tell me how you want to play it. So there's something to be said about that. But, I mean, we're talking about 12 and 13-year-olds playing this game, and, I don't know if we really get that idea. I mean, you almost need this primer to say, like, here's a way to run this that would make it more exciting and thrilling.
Yeah, and this is 1981, so I think, we've had some adventure writing, but we're still kind of, like, figuring out what works in these adventures. And not only is it 1981, but it's, like, a reprint of stuff from years earlier, so... some of the things that are coming out contemporary with Against the Giants, like, the last one we did, Dwellers of the Forbidden City, was the same year, and it's like there's a lot more going on in that. Like you can tell the evolution just from the late 70s to the early 80s, like how that has changed.
Yeah.
And something like The Lost City was a lot different than this. So I think this is a little bit of a victim of like reprinting the first generation of modules into the second generation of modules era, and like comparatively it just doesn't, I don't think it holds up as well, or at least it requires a lot more work from the GM to get it to work. And some of the like really cool stuff in the module, you have to it feels like the module like pulls back from it a little bit, and we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
The one thing that I did want to state as well is since this is technically 3 modules in one, we're probably not going to go through it as much depth as we would going through a single module. Otherwise, this podcast will be 8 hours long. But we will go through and kind of talk about things that we think are cool or important things.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of rooms we could skip.
Yeah. Yep.
I guess I will also say, like, there's so much emphasis on treasure in this module. There's so much emphasis on how much, all the treasure. Like, literally, if you got rid of the treasure in each room, this module would be half the size it is. Like, there's so much emphasis on money and things and items and, that it's almost like it does it a disservice in many ways, because it's like, why do you need all this space for all of this money for each little room? And, it's sort of like you give all of this space for the money, and then the bad guys, the giants, get like two sentences, maybe a sentence. And it's like, that seems just like a waste. But that's just my opinion.
Well, it's also like I'm thinking, like, as I was reading through this, I'm like halfway through the second dungeon. I almost said instance. The second dungeon. And I'm just thinking, like, if they're stopping to looting, they can't possibly hold this much treasure. Yeah. Even if they have bags of holding. In D&D, the original bag of holding, it holds the area of a sofa, and there's way more than the area of a sofa in coins and gems that you get in here. It's wild.
Yeah, all I can think of is, like, they're going back to because in each one of them they talk about how there's like a safe space, and it's like, well, that safe space must just have bags and bags and bags of money.
Right. Yeah, and money is experience, but, like, what do you do with, like, 50,000 gold?
So I'm not sure that in first edition, I can't remember if gold is equal to experience. I know that in the basic set and the expert set, I don't think gold equals something. I can't remember. I don't think we ever played that way, but I don't think it is. So you just have all of this money for things.
Okay, well, while I'm editing this, I'm going to look up if gold is experience in this edition of the game, and then I'm going to put it in right here, right now.
Sounds good.
Stop time.
Hey everyone, recording this from the future to let you know that in the AD&D Player's Handbook on page 106, it does tell you that you get 1 experience per gold piece that you recover of treasure. So in this version of the game, you are expected to level up based off of the treasure that you get. If you're wondering why we looked this up in the previous episode and didn't know it for this one, it's because I had not got to that part of the edit by the time we recorded Against the Giants. So I didn't know when I was recording this.
Time begins to move.
Okay, so you just heard me from the future definitely answering that question, and I hope that I didn't make myself go down a 30-minute rabbit hole of looking through D&D books. Anyways, Kyle, what is your what is your initial just like thought or I don't know, like pitch for this, for this module?
I think my pitch would be come up with, if you want to run this, it could be very rewarding if you want to run this, but you need to come up with like what is going on. You need to come up with more of a good narrative about why you're doing this than what is experienced, and then read through the whole module and think about that narrative and how you can fit all of these giants, all of these traps, all of this dungeon into that narrative, because that narrative is very loose in this module, and it would be much more compelling when you are doing something that's important for either you're trying to kill all the hill giant, or you're trying to kill all these giants because they're ravenous and taking over everything. One of the things they point out, and Gary Gygax puts in here, is like, oh, the nobles and the kings of the realm are telling you that you have to do this, or they're gonna kill you, or they're gonna like take you over. So if you don't do a good job, we're gonna get rid of you. Well, I did a little research because I remember like this seems kind of like a 12th level fighter, which is one of the characters that you can play in this. A 12th level fighter is considered like a noble. It's considered a lord. So if you're a lord, like, how is you're the lords telling people what to do, not them telling you what to do. Like, this is for really high level characters. We're talking about like elves that are at max level, like you can't get it because in first edition D&D, the max an elf can get is 7th level in fighter and 11th level in magic user, and that's as far as they go. So conceivably, you would have a character who's been maxed out, and it's like, well, they're equal to a prince. Like they're going to be like some kind of noble. So it's almost like you come up with, like, think about those ideas and then come up with a narrative that fits with your in this campaign that makes sense. But it has a thread, and it could be extremely rewarding. And there's a reason why people are so excited about this module when it first came out, and people played it, and it's a classic because it sort of takes that genesis of those first sort of, we're going to have a series of modules, we're going to have a series of adventures that culminates into something really big. And that's an important element in campaign and story-driven details. But the story is very loose here, and you have to sort of create it. So, Kyle, after that rant I had, what is your pitch synopsis of this module?
And then you walked into the room and fought some giants.
That's a much better one than me, and that is so true.
Yeah, this book is 31 pages. And I looked at it, I was like, I've read a 30-page module before. That's like that's what I do for this podcast. It's not that bad. This is like the densest 31 pages of a module that we have read yet. It does so, like, there's so much stuff happening, and there's so many rooms and so many things here. It's so surprising. But a lot of this module can be boiled down into, because the theming is you're invading like where the giants are. So it's like they are living their normal life in their headquarters, and you're walking in and killing them.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's pretty much like you walk from one room to another, killing some giants. Like, I'm sure the DM could do some creative politicking or something, but I feel like that is not the intent of this module. Even though he says, make it your own and be creative, I don't think you could repeatedly do that through all three of these modules.
Yeah. I mean, he even says, like, most of these giants are going to fight to the death. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is the highest level adventure we have covered thus far. We've mostly been doing intro adventures other than Isle of Dread. This is a level 8 to 12 adventure, which is a pretty powerful AD&D character.
Yeah. If you think about most sub-races like dwarves and elves, you're reaching the absolute maximum level that they can get to if you go by, what the rules say. Although, one of the characters in the back, which we can get to, there's a lot of stuff that breaks. There's a lot of broken things.
I desperately want to talk about these characters, so go ahead.
Yeah. No, they're great.
Yeah, and then quickly, so this is module G1, G2, and G3. This leads into Descent into the Depths of the Earth, and then Vault of the Drow, and then that goes into Queen of the Demon Web Pits,
where you fight Loth.
Yeah. So we'll get into that a little into the whole Drow stuff later on. But you mentioned the pre-mades, so you could probably guess what I want to talk about regarding these pre-mades.
Yeah, they're in the back of the book, so if we want to talk about that, let's do it.
Okay. I need to talk about this because, good lord, what is with the name of these pre-made characters?
Oh my god, they're so good.
Mr. Gygax. So Gary Gygax is known for, I think, one of the signatures of Gary Gygax. There's three things that I would say is the signature of like a Gary Gygax adventure to me. One is the use of exclamation points, the Gary Gygax exclamation point. Two is his hatred of horses.
True.
And 3 is the names he comes up with for things. So I guess let's alternate reading through these names. Do you want to start with the first one?
So the first character on here is Gleepwerp the Eyebiter, who is a human magic user. Gleepwerp, mind you.
And then the second is Cloyer Burse, the Magsman, the human thief.
Then we have Roiki Swerkgood. He's a human cleric.
Followed up by Frush O'Suggle, the human fighter.
And then one of my favorites, Funkin' Hottie Peak, the High Elf Fighter Magic User.
Followed by Flurd Trandle, the Human Cleric.
Then there's Redmod Dumple. He's a Dwarf Fighter.
And then there's Faffle Dwe'o-mercraeft. Faffle Dwe'o-mercraeft, the Human Magic User.
And then, of course, your good friend, Beak Winders of Crawdle, who is a half-elf ranger.
So the interesting thing that I noted about this, and I was kind of like looking around because it's like these names are like weird. Are these a joke or is this like an Easter egg or something? And so Depths of the Earth, which the module Depths of the Earth, which can lead into this. I saw someone mentioned on a forum about these characters. So I looked in Depths of the Earth, and some of these characters are in the pre-mades for Depths of the Earth, but not all of them. So I don't know if that is what we would call now as an Easter egg. You have Depths of the Earth.
So I pulled out of all my old D&D modules, and I found good old Descent to the Depths of the Earth. And Funk and Hottie Peak, Beak Winders of Crodal, and I think one of the other ones. Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah, I have Faffle Dwe'o-mercraeft is the...
Yeah, Faffle Dwe'o-mercraeft. They're all also in Descent to the Depths of the Earth. Some of them, they also have different stats. So somehow... Okay, so this is one of my favorite things about this. So there's a whole thing in old D&D where, other race characters like elves and dwarves and stuff have a max level. But if they have higher stats, they can get to higher levels. So, like, I looked this up in the player's handbook. So if you have, like, an 8, the thing is to always get an 18. If you have an 18, then you can get to the max level of whatever it is. So Fonk and Hottie Peak in Giants only has a 15 strength, so he can only get to a 5th level fighter. But in this, he has a 17 strength, so in theory, he can get up to 6th level fighter. He also only has a 15 intelligence, so he can only get to an 8th level magic user. If he gets a 17 in intelligence, he can get up to, I think, 9. I know you can get up to an 11th level if you have an 18. If you have an 18 intelligence, you can get up to 11th level. So they mess with the stats too. So not only are these characters like the same characters, but they've also now got different stats too. So I don't know if that's a thing. The other thing is that like there's the ranger Beak Winders cannot get to, I think a half-elf can only get to an 8th level ranger or 7th level ranger. I can't remember which. And elves can't be rangers for some reason, but half-elves can. And he's 9th level, and he should only be 8th level, if you want to get into all that nerd, leveling stuff. So it's like, he sort of breaks his own rules with a lot of this. That's what's sort of fun to me, is that he made all these rules in the player's handbook about, these can't get to this level and that can't get to that level. And then you look at these characters and it's like, you just broke all your own rules, dude.
Yeah, so I wonder if this is like what we would call now like an Easter egg.
Yeah.
Or if this is supposed to be like some sort of canonicity that certain characters did not survive.
Yeah.
That module to make it to.
And there's only 3 out of the 9 that made it into this to the next module. So does that mean all of those died, or I don't know. Or the other thing is like, well, were these people's characters or were these the names that he came up with? They sound like names that he came up with, right?
I feel like these seem like Gary Gygax names to me from reading through reading through his writing.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get like a feeling for his voice, and like he has a very specific way that he comes up with names.
Fun.
Yeah. I love it. So our first adventure in Against the Giants, G1, is the Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. This kind of gives you a background, and I kind of have a little bone to pick with this. So the background is essentially you're basically outside of the Hill Giant headquarters in a cave that you scout, and you're safe in the cave, so you can like go back and forth, raiding this giant home, and then going back to your cave and resting. But you are essentially like tasked to figure out why the giants keep attacking, and to stop it, essentially.
Yeah, and don't forget, I don't remember it's in this one, but they're like, the king will kill you if you don't do it. Which is like, what?
Yeah, and it's like, no. Oh, and then here's so I know that I've mentioned the Gary Gygax exclamation point. Just looking into backgrounds, there's just a random one there. The adventurers must deliver a sharp check, deal a lesson to the clan of hill giants nearby, or else return and put their heads upon the block for the headman's axe! Exclamation point.
Yeah, so it's like, and we're talking about, there's I think there's even like, I think there's like a 14th level fighter or 12th level fighter or something like that. That's a lord. And like, you get like a keep and stuff. Like, what is going on? Like, when you're ordering this guy to like do what? And
yeah, maybe the rules that for G1 when it first came out didn't have that, but it seems to be like, go do this adventure or we'll kill you is like not a very good motivation.
Yeah, like a 14th level fighter could probably kill everybody in that room that's telling him to like go and do that. I mean, we're talking about a bunch of nobles who are like, what, 5th level? That's nothing.
Yeah, or the magic user, like, I'm going to execute you. Okay, disintegrate.
Yeah, exactly. Fireball.
Execute this antimatter from my finger. Thank you.
Yeah, so, I mean, whatever. It's fine. That's why it's like, I mentioned, like, you need to have some kind of other motivation other than that.
So, the thing that really, like a little bit bothers me with this, so it's obvious that maybe he didn't write all these adventures all at the same time. It didn't have, like, the whole overarching plot. But, and spoilers for a module that came out in 1981, the Drow are behind this. They are the ones that are using the giants to attack. But the background in the first adventure doesn't say like it like acts like it's a mystery to the dungeon master as well. It doesn't say like, hey, what's really happening is that the Drow are ordering the giants to attack, and using politicking to get all these giants to work together to attack this area. It doesn't tell the dungeon master that, so they have to read the whole module, and it's like, Bruce Willis at the end of Sixth Sense. Oh, it's the Drow. Like it's a surprise to you.
The other piece that's really obnoxious about it to me is it's like, oh, it's the Drow and they're just evil and they just don't like other people. So they're just trying to get the giants to go murder everybody. And it's like, well, what? I mean, they're sort of happy in their little like Drow realm. So they hit everything. I mean, which is kind of like, okay, that's really boring.
Yeah, I mean, it does talk about, the Drow, like their weapons and magic stuff, like actually disintegrates in the sun and doesn't work, and they don't like being in the sun. So like doing politicking to attack the overworld makes sense, but it would be nice to have like a little more motivation behind what they're doing other than, hey, they're just
yeah, that seems to be the thing. They just want to cause chaos, I guess, because they don't like the upper world, they don't like people in the sunlight. So we're just gonna send these giants out to go do all this. And it's just like, well, okay.
And that motivation is not hard for a dungeon master to come up with, but it would be nice for the background of the adventure to tell a dungeon master what's happening, because presumably, they're gonna reference this as they're running it, but they might only read through it once. And if you know that when you're reading through it, you might read a passage in one of the the hill giant Steading and be like, oh, hey, maybe I'll put like a hint that the Drow are involved here. Like, it's good to have that in the back of your mind, but the background doesn't, it's like it doesn't want to spoil it for the DM, which is weird because they're the DM. Like, tell them everything, tell them the synopsis of the adventure. What is happening?
Right. It almost feels like, I don't know. I don't know if it's just that he wrote this first one and the second one without having a real idea of who the big bad was be, and then he writes the third one, he knows who the big bad is. But yeah, I'm not sure how that sort of evolved. But even like, okay, well, the hill giants are bad in doing stuff, like in killing people. Okay, but why? Or why is this different from what they were doing before? Like, why? So it's like, well,
yes.
I mean, we should say, hey, they're targeting these certain villages over and over and over again, or they're targeting certain things, and there's the whole reason behind, and like, I mean, he says of the module, you can be creative about these things, but again, 12-year-old Kyle isn't going to necessarily like put all that together. So it'd be nice to have some thread and some ideas as to why that is.
I think what he's going for here, and it doesn't say this in the background, is that you're supposed to go into the hill giants base and be like, we're attacking hill giants. And then you find frost giants there. And it's like, that's weird. Why are frost giants here? Right? Like the giants are like clearly like having diplomacy with each other and like working with each other, which is weird. But the background doesn't say like, hey, by the way, like you should really lean into the fact that it's weird that there's other giants in this location. It doesn't tell you that. I think it's up to the DM to make that decision, which is, I mean, I don't know. I feel like having that guidance for the DM would be really.
Yeah, I don't even see anywhere where he says like normally giants don't work together. Like normally,
right?
Hill giants don't work with frost giants, which don't work with fire giants. No one works together. I mean, maybe they may talk about that in the monster manual. I would have to look, but I don't. I mean, even then, it's like just put it in the module. Just say like, hey, you should talk about what's obvious that these guys do not get along, and they are, and there has to be a reason why.
And I looked it up in the DMG, or not the DMG. I looked it up in the monster manual, I think, to reference something later on. There is clearly like a hierarchy of giants that starts like the hill giants are at the bottom, and then I think it's like stone giants and then frost giants. So there's like a hierarchy of giants, and we'll get into that for something else later. But it just I wish this gave better background. Like it doesn't give the DM a lot,
right?
For putting this to it makes you like it should prime you for reading the adventure, and adventures are written now to prime you to understand how to read the adventure, and they haven't done that yet. They haven't figured that out yet in adventure writing.
Yeah, I mean it's the pictures are great.
Yeah, the pictures are great, and you do have like a safe house in the cave, which is because healing takes a considerable amount of time in D&D. Although at this level you probably have access to plenty of healing spells, but still, it's nice to have that ability to rest. So there's the upper works and then the lower works of the hill giants. The hill giants steading. Which is it does note something too here that I thought was funny. So it's kind of like what you would expect a domicile to look like. Like it's all made out of wood, and it's like a bunch of different. It's like a giant house essentially that the hill giants live on. But as I was reading this, I was like, oh, everything's made out of wood. Why don't you just burn it down? Well, they do talk about that in the book.
Obviously, they had a lot of tournaments where people were like, well, I'm just going to burn it down with a bunch of fireballs. I mean, I've got Fireball. I've got a 12th level wizard. I'm going to throw a fireball at it. That's 12d6.
Yeah, so all wood in this place is very damp. A normal fire will only have a 2% chance per round of burning or setting the place afire, and even magical fires will only have an 8% chance per round of the same. If the party should manage to set the upper works of the steading aflame, they will be forced to wait a week before trying to discover a way into the lower dungeon level, for hot embers will prevent entry before this period of time. He doesn't want you to burn it. Just burn it down. Don't do that.
I don't know. I would be like, okay, well, I'm gonna come there at night, and I'm just gonna keep trying to light this thing on fire until it lights on fire, because that's going to be so much easier getting rid of everybody if it's all on fire. Obviously someone has thought of that, and he was like, no, you can't do that. There's only 8%. There's only 2% chance of doing that.
So yeah, and it's described like a giant homestead. Like there's multiple, it kind of like makes me think of a giant ski lounge.
Yeah.
For people that are, 8 to 13 feet tall. So going into the rooms, I don't know if there's a specific one that you want to talk about. Just let me know. But the first thing that popped out is that so we enter. So it's the entry and cloak room, and then there's in one of these rooms there's 2 snoring hill giants that aren't using their CPAPs, and they are guarding the entrance. And it says there's a 1 chance in 20 that any well-placed scheme will kill them. Killing them will fail. Otherwise, they will be slain simultaneously. So basically, like, you can slit their throats while they're sleeping, and if you roll a nat 1, it doesn't work. Essentially, is what he's saying.
And then the next thing is just like there's another hill giant who's all dozing. And remember, half the sentence is all the things that they're wearing and the money that they have.
Right, and I'm going to be very mature about this, but I do want to talk about some of the language that was used, and You probably know what I'm about to say, but I think the connotation of one of these words has changed since 1981 because it would not be used in a book. So I will read this paragraph. There is a nearby empty keg of ale between them. Unless attacked and slain simultaneously, any molestation will enable one to alert the other guard at B.
Lovely.
Yeah, so language has evolved. We use words differently. I do know there's an author, a YouTuber that wrote a book, and her name is Lindsay Ellis, and she wrote like a sci-fi book, and she talked about it took place in like I think it takes place in like the mid 90s, and she had to do a bunch of research, and she was like, I was surprised at like, you just don't think of words changing or being created, but like there's a lot of words that we use now that you would write, and then their editor would be like, yeah, people in 1995 didn't use this word, it wasn't invented yet. So words change. It's just when you read something like that, it jumps off the page, and you're just like, whoa, that is not. We use that word for a different thing now.
Yeah, that's not a thing we would use. We would not use that word. So yeah, one of the things that really struck me, one of my favorite sentences on this one, so on 4, which is a barracks where there's 2 sleeping giants, sorry. There's no treasures in this room. Save a small pouch in the first chest search, which will contain 110 platinum pieces. Like,
no treasure except the treasure.
What except for the treasure? Like, what? Like, and realistically, you could just say, and I don't know. It's with this thing of it sort of brings us back to like, there's such a focus on treasure that like, oh, we gotta, even when there is only a little bit of treasure, we gotta point it out. There's no treasure, but there is this one treasure because and also I think like, there's a space issue here in these early modules where like they're trying to publish less words in order to have more space on the page. And to me, you could have just, in order to do that, you could have just said the first chest search has 110 platinum pieces. Otherwise, there's no other treasure. You could have just said that. And that would have been a lot easier to convey than saying there's no treasure, except for this one thing. Because it's so you're like, there is treasure. I don't know. It's weird.
It's weird because it's like they when they write these adventures, they want you to be able to miss things. So it's kind of like, well, we have to put something that's missable in here. I do want to also point out on page 3, the art by Dave Sutherland.
Oh yeah.
It's like a giant hanging up a bag, and to the right there is a presumably an adventurer that is hiding behind some hay, and they're like giving the dumbest looking face ever.
So Sutherland is not my favorite artist, and I think it's funny that you called that a piece of hay because it's actually supposed to be a fur. So it's like a fur that's like hanging on there, okay, and that's kind of one of the problems with him is he's not as adept an artist as the other ones, in my opinion. So that does look like hay, but it's supposed to be a fur.
Well, yeah, I also feel like I just misread that, but. Yeah, so I actually personally pretty much like this. I think it's, I like this art. I think
it's totally cute. I mean, it's totally fun to point out because like they're trying to hide behind these furs, and it's a very cute little comical art. But like you could have made those furs look like furs, or
yeah. And it is kind of just like, hey, D&D can be fun.
Yeah,
like.
You can be cheeky.
Like, we know that, stupid stuff happens in D&D, and that's, like, the fun of it. So just kind of, like, for an adventure that I think is, like, a little on the dry side, like, that, seeing that art, like, really is really helpful.
It freshens it up.
So the writing in this really does remind me of Keep on the Borderlands, like, the way that Gygax writes about rooms and what's in the rooms.
Right.
So I still haven't read enough of him to determine if this is his writing style or how adventures just were in the late 70s. I'm still like trying to figure that out myself. I'm getting like a little sense of the voice that he writes with, but I'm not sure if this the room with stuff in it format is a Gary Gygax thing or if it's a early adventure thing. And then in room 5, the maid's chamber, which you talked about the art for this on page 5 earlier in the podcast. This talks about giantesses. So I guess we'll get into that a little bit. When I was reading, I was like, why does it keep specifying that there's a giantess and a giant and a giantess? So I looked it up in the monster manual, and the reason that they are called giantesses is because they are not as strong as the male giants, and every giantess is considered the lesser form of the current giant. So it goes ogres, hill giants, and then stone giants, and then fire giants. A hill giantess, because they are not male, is one step down. So they are an ogre in stats and not a hill giant.
So I guess we should probably bring up the giantess in the room, which is that, and I also looked this up in the monster manual, in the player's handbook. Every single female is weaker. Characters are weaker. There's a max strength for female characters. There's a max strength for, so like a female character can't become as, they can't level as fast. It's just, there's all a thing. So females are always weaker than males in all first edition D&D, from players to creatures. So the only exception is actually the Drow. The Drow are actually more, the females are more powerful, but of course they're also more mean. Which is interesting.
Yeah, and that I mean, yeah, it is a way to make them seem more alien compared to the rest of everything else. But yeah, this is a really dated thing that was left behind in this older editions of D&D, and I am glad that it was.
Yeah, I'm we don't need this. It is not. Yes, males have more testosterone typically, and they do grow muscles faster. But for our purposes of having a game in which we would like everyone to be welcome, it would be nice to not have the female characters always be less than the male characters.
Yeah, let's leave this, if you want to just leave sexual dimorphism for like the monsters. You don't.
It is obnoxious in this.
Yeah, it actually. So even if, like, let's say you don't care about that whole that whole thing, it makes the adventure harder to run because you have all the giants in front of you, and then you have to be like, oh wait, this is a giantess, but it's a frost giantess, so I need to treat her like a male hill giant. Like, it just makes it harder to run.
It literally is obnoxious, not only on like just a level of trying to get males and females to play this game, and also just having a feeling of like, okay, we have some sense of equality. It is also technically harder to run, like technically trying to like distinguish between a male drow and a female drow, and a male giant and a female giant, and this giant has this and this and that, and then this. It's obnoxious, both from a board game level and also just a, I don't want to say that flavor level, like vibe level.
Even if, if I was reading this and I was like, I don't care, I want to, whatever. It's still, I probably would ignore this rule because it's harder to run mechanically.
Exactly.
So anyways, I'm glad that this was left in old editions of the game. And I think they got rid of it in, because I remember reading, at least in Baldur, like I can tell you from playing Baldur's Gate 1 that it basically, like when you select male or female, it says there's no difference other than how you look and maybe like how the people react to you in the world, but you aren't considered a lesser giant because you are female.
It's just obnoxious.
Yeah. So anyways, we're going to be bringing up giantesses, but just keep in mind that in this module, the giantess is considered the previous, like the lesser tier of giant, if they are female.
And so much space for treasure. Let's just say in this module, you want to search absolutely every room all the time. Every time you get into a room, even if you don't see anything, you need to search it.
Yeah, I mean, this is like where I don't know if you've heard the term Greyhawk the room, but this is... Like, I have heard the word Greyhawk used as a verb for searching the room. Like, hey, we're going to Greyhawk the room. So this is why this type of writing. And speaking of saving space, he gives HP for everything. So like in a room here, like I'm just going to read it. So it's like in this, there's a long hall. It's an 80-foot long passageway, and there's a bunch of giants in it. And it says, there, there are three stone giants, 22 hill giants, 8 ogres. The ogres are HP 31 to 29. 3 of them are 28, 27, 26, and 20. So I get that he like pre-rolled it for you, which probably saves some time, but do we really care that one of them is 31 HP and the other is 29? Why can't they all be the same HP? They would save so much space if they got rid of that.
Yeah, I know. Well, on page 4, and I don't know if you want to skip all the way there, but in the long hall, which is really the main part of this whole sort of adventure thing, you have a lot of description as to what they're eating, which is I guess good, and like what's on the table. There's okay, and then there's so many monsters in this room, because there's the chief and his wife. The chief is a frost giant, and she's actually a male hill giant because she's so great.
Yeah, but he's not. Just to be clear, he's not a frost giant, but he fights.
He's not a frost giant, but he fights as a frost giant.
Yeah, so he has the stats of a frost giant because he's like the chief.
Yeah, and then like the 22 hill giants, hit points of 44, 3 at 40, a 39, 5 at 38, 5 at 37, 3 at 36, 33, 32, and 27. Yeah, just make them all 35 or something. I don't know, whatever.
Right, and you're supposed to walk in this room and be like, oh, that's weird. There's like a hill giant, and then there's a cloud giant, and then there's 3 stone giants and ogres. Like, what is happening? Why are there so many different things? But like, you absolutely you have to avoid this room. You cannot. This room, Kyle, has 1,423 HP. And you are 7 D&D characters that presumably attack like once or twice. I don't even think you attack twice at a turn.
Well, there should be 9. There should be 9, and you do have access to, so let's look at some of the leveling here. Yeah, so, I mean, you have to think about it like, you do have an 11th level, and a 12th, you have an 11th level magic user, don't you? Or 12th? Anyway, so if you think about that, those are also they can shoot however many 3rd level fireballs, and those fireballs are going to be whatever level they're at. So that's good. Fireball is going to be your friend in this room. You're going to be throwing a lot of fireballs if you just enter into the double door. I think that's what I did with my character. We entered into the double doors, and we found the chief, his wife, and all of this nonsense, and tried to fight it, and we were like, oh, I think we're sort of dead. Yeah.
Yeah, you're supposed to avoid this. Like, just to give you perspective, like, so like how much HP is in a room is a thing that I think about all the time, just because I don't want fights to last too long when I'm running D&D. And like, to put this in perspective, like our tier 4 D&D 5th edition game, where like you're playing super heroic people, I knew how much damage that players did. Kyle, your rogue and like our paladin that did the most damage did like 200 damage a round. It would take your level 20 5th edition D&D characters a while to get through this room.
And being attacked by...
We're playing 80...
I don't know, 35 different things,
Action economy, man. You are losing. There is 7, 29, 30, 37... attacks in this room that are coming at you, 38 because of the cave bear. Like, you are supposed to avoid this room. Like, it is designed for you to look in the room and be like, oh my god, I am not going in there, and then closing the door and then going elsewhere.
Right. Or yeah, you're for sure trying to lure them out. Maybe you like open the door, throw a couple fireballs, and then run out the room. I mean, you got to do something or you're toast.
Yeah, to be clear, D&D, like early D&D wants you to think strategically more than like later editions of the game. Like they don't want you to just open the door, run in. Like some rooms they want you to open the door, run in, and kill everything, but you have to kind of think about these sort of things. And I mean, that's like the design of this room, but like, my god, there's a lot of stuff in this room. And if they ran in and attacked, this would be a nightmare to run as a DM. Like, I would hate it.
It would be.
I don't want to attack with 22 hill giants. No thanks.
It would be so nuts. And I think it was, and that's probably why we did that way and just stopped playing. But yeah, and I don't know how much we need to talk about all these other rooms. Most of it is, the chamber of the chief's wife. There's a cave bear in there. Not the cave bear that's beneath the chief's table. And it has a whole bunch of money.
There is something I do like here. 13, the weapons room. So there's a magic warhammer +2. One other hammer, it is out of sight in the corner and is seen by closer inspection. The weapon has a magic mouth spell placed on it to speak to a dwarf. And it says, "Here's a kiss for you, runt." So until it has spoken, it will radiate magic very strongly. So, like, there's a whole thing in D&D about, like, giants and dwarves fighting each other. So that's, like, a little flavor that it, like, insults dwarves.
Yeah, and 14 has a giant slaying sword belonging to the cloud giant that looks like a wall sconce. Is that right? Yeah, so that's pretty unique, and it's also like an intelligent sword, so which is kind of cool.
It is okay, so it is unique. It is an intelligent sword. It is unique, but I do have to mention this. I will probably bring this up in future modules, and I know I'm going to bring it up again in this module. But and it's not really a trope, but this really does bother me in game design in video games too. Of the thing that kills the thing is in its room.
Yeah.
So, like, I get that a giant would have a giant slaying sword because, like, hey, maybe they fight other giants all the time. But I really don't like designs where the thing that it's like Superman keeping a kryptonite sword in his lair. Why? Throw it in the sun.
Yeah. No, I see. I mean, I just think it's kind of fun that he just puts it as like this illusion that's there, and that's the thing that's sort of annoying. It's like we have this great sword that's going to do a lot of things, but
yeah. So you have to basically one sconce. There's a torch that's a wall sconce that it looks kind of weird, and you have to investigate it specifically. Like, it's not a thing you're going to go to the room and the DM's going to be like, "You see a sword." Like, you have to call it out.
Yeah, you have to search for it,
and then you have to touch it, and then you'll get the sword, which is like going to be super helpful for you because you're going to be fighting hundreds of giants. But I always just thought that, like, you putting your weakness in your layer has always been kind of weird to me. I think there would be like a better way of incorporating that. Like, I don't know. Honestly, if I was running this, I probably would just give them in the intro, be like, "Here's a giant slaying sword. Have fun."
Or, it's just the cloud giant has the sword. He's using the sword because he's worried about other giants.
Right.
He just has it.
It also does speak Hillstone and Frost Giant languages, which is going to be super.
Yeah,
super
it's
useful.
like, here's a super useful thing, but there's a lot of that in this module, though. There's a lot of things of like, here's this, you need to get through some other loops and hoops and weird stuff, and a lot of it is random, which I also really don't like. That it's like, well, I want people, if I'm running this, like, I want people to be observant and like try to look for stuff, and then if it's a clever puzzle to get something, like, that's cool. But if it's just a die roll, like, that's just silly. But this is back to where this is going, more as a board game rather than as a an actual role-playing game.
Right. I feel this is more on the board game like section of the spectrum. So on, and if you want to talk about any of these, bring it up. But on page 5, so we have like orc slaves, and in room 22 we have the return of the Gary Gygax exclamation point.
Yep.
Where he's talking about like dire wolves in this room, and he says they will immediately attack any non-giant or non-ogre entering the area. Note that if they see the whip, however, they cower and make no sound, but otherwise they howl and bite! Exclamation point.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is like basically, this concludes the top level. It's basically like the room with all the giants in it is like the big climax of like, oh, there's something weird possibly going on, but like we can't just attack all those people because we're gonna die.
You got to come up with some kind of strategy as to how you're going to take on that room, and that is the big piece there. I think is like, are you gonna throw, are you going to try to kite them out? Are you going to ambush them? Are you going to, maybe open a door and throw a polymorph spell of a giant dragon or something? Like, I don't know. Like, but it's, you got to come up with some creative way in there to deal with them. And there's also, like, that's the other part that's a little bit annoying. It's like you look at that room and it's pretty obvious, but to 12-year-old Kyle, it wasn't obvious that you needed to do something. You thought like, oh, well, I must be equipped in order to be able to take on this dungeon, so I must be able to go into that room and, take it on. And it's like, no.
Yeah, it also, like, there's no skills in AD&D. Like, when in RPG design, when you look at a character sheet, those are your tools for interacting with the world. And what do you see on an AD&D character sheet? You see your basic stats, and then you see your weapons and your spells. So your basic way of interacting with the world is through combat and fighting things, which is not a bad thing, but it makes it like weird when you run into rooms like that. Like, there's probably many of people that died in that room if they didn't have DMs that were super nice.
Yeah.
I do want to point out as well on the next page, or page 6. So you go underground in like after you deal with the top, and room 1 is the marshalling area, and it says this room is primarily meant as a place where the slaves are rounded up and sent about their tasks under guard. And it, like, the language of this tells you what a room is for, but doesn't tell you like what that looks like. And if you told like people what that looked like, you could tell them what the room is for.
Yeah.
So that would be better. Like, I don't know what, like, if I was reading this and you walked into this room, I guess I would be like, okay, well, this is the marshalling area, so there's probably like, you can see where people probably stand in line for a really long time, and like there's maybe some like papers where they keep records or something, but I don't know what that room would necessarily look like.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah.
And then I think that we get to like, at least one of my favorite parts of this like first part is the Keeper. I think the Keeper is really cool.
Yeah, the Keeper thing's cool.
So, to the Chamber of the Keeper. The Keeper is a ghastly hill giant, hunchbacked, twisted, and with but one good eye. He is thoroughly wicked and evil, strong, and remorseless. He is never without one of his 2 pet carnivorous apes, and both are in his lair.
This is the guy I want to have a conversation with.
Yeah, so like, it's funny, you read these adventures and it's like, so these, you know, you walk into the room and there's 4 doors and there's 3 windows and there's 5 chests, and each chest has 22 silver. And then you read a page like this, room like this, and you're like, oh, this is like, it's so interesting. Like, it stands out even more because of the white. A lot of this dungeon feels like white space, and then you get to this and it's like a splash of color, and it just makes that seem even more special, yeah, I guess.
For sure.
That is certainly a charm that these early modules have, is that sort of thing. Oh, and then the return of the Gary Gygax exclamation point.
Yep.
One guarding to the north of the door, and the other on a platform built above it.
Yep, the 2 apes, basically.
Yeah, so I don't know. I just like the Keeper's really cool. Maybe because he's like the one that's described as different than everyone else, but he also has 2 carnivorous ape pets, which is cool.
Well, you can get to the cells, and the cells have basically an elf who is a compatriot that you can add to your party, which will help you. And it's, I mean, you know, no spells and wounded from torture, but I guess in theory you could, they'll actually, you can rescue them. So if you go out of the dungeon and then rest, you would have a very powerful ally who would be helping you, because that is the max level for that elf. Like, that's the max level they can get to.
And they will serve you if you are good, they will serve you for 1 year after this. So you have them for the other 2 adventures if you do them all.
Yeah, because, you know, elves live for thousands of years, so a year is like no big deal.
Right. If you want to see more about this, please see the anime Freer In at Journey's End.
Right.
And notably, it's a character that you meet in a dungeon that doesn't stab you in the back.
I know, and a Gygax module that happens, because usually in a Gygax module, whoever you're helping is going to murder you.
Don't worry, there's more of that later, but we do have this one reprieve of a elf that will assist you and not stab you in the back. That's cool, and probably like a really like nice thing for people that ran into this character. Also not named, so you need to do that yourself. Or I guess if people made their characters, you could just steal a name from the back of the book, one of the glorious names from the back of the book.
Like Grink Herkelspec. It seems like a very Gygaxian name.
On 4 for the trap, we have I'm going to assume it's a typo because this makes no sense. As soon as the cell door is opened, the 3 skeletons spring to attack with swords previously covered from view by dust and dirt. Each skeleton takes 8 HP. Do they have 8 HP, or do they hit you for 8 HP?
I assume I don't know.
I think it's a typo.
Yep.
Because it's a skeleton, so they presumably don't have that much HP.
You'd think they had 3 editors, so you'd think they'd cover that, but that's okay. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, true, but who knows how much. Well, so the thing about editing this, right? Did they just get the 3 adventures and put them together? Like, I don't know. I don't know what happened, but from the interviews in our last podcast where I was listening to Zeb Cook talk about this process, it sounds like they did not have any time to do anything.
Yeah, it seems like it. There's a lot of slaves down here is pretty much what I get from a lot of this level.
Yeah, so there's 78 slaves, which you can actually like kind of get on your side if you free them.
A lot of orcs.
So have fun running as 78 NPCs, Mr. DM. Which, I've done something similar. It's not that hard. You just have one person talk for the group, kind of. But still, that's a... there is a limitation. What you can do mechanically with the rules limits what you do in the game, right? Like, I can never give players in D&D a scroll that summons 20 Celestials that all come out and grab you. Because grabbing is a pain in the ass to manage.
Yeah, grapple rules in first edition are ridiculous.
Right, so you're limited by what the rules can do, right? No one's ever going to make something that does that. So, running into 78 people that could be your ally is like, I guess it's pretty cool, especially if you're a fighter, because they have a whole sub thing of having followers. So this could be like a cool place to give your fighter a bunch of cool followers. But there's 78 of them, man. That's a lot. Yeah, so there's just some natural caverns down here, some carrion crawlers.
Well, you do meet the fire giants in room 16. These are fire giants, HP 5750, who will immediately raise a shout and come to fight. They are by the forges and bellows in the eastern section of the area. So there's like 2 fire giants in the armory and smith, and then there's a bunch of dwarves chained there.
Right, and another potential ally that you can get, it does say that, yeah, there's 7 dwarves. They're forced labor. 6 of them are useless to the party that only want to escape. But there is an 8th level fighter with 18 strength. And he will serve the party as long as he gets treasure share equal to his level and a chance to fight giants. Well, there's a share of treasure in this, so.
I guess, although this is the first mention where they share equal to his level. So, like, are you supposed to share the treasure based on their level?
Yeah, I am unsure what that means. If there's like formal rules for sharing treasure, because most every D&D group I've ever been in has been like, hey, we split it evenly.
Yeah. I know. Okay. Well, that's a thing. Apparently.
Yeah, but I mean, it's another NPC that you can get, which is pretty cool. They are unnamed, so you do have to come up with that yourself. But that's a potential cool character that you can get, and they don't stab you in the back. So yeah, there's some carrion crawlers down here, some troglodytes. So basically the hill giant stead is on top of a natural cave. I do want to talk about a typo. Well, I'm pretty sure it's a typo. In the cavern of the carrion crawlers, there's a table that each area thoroughly checked might discover some treasure, but each such area may be searched but once. Use the following table to determine what is found. So you go from no treasure to some gold to a piece of jewelry, a potion, a scroll, a ring, a wand, miscellaneous magic item, sword and or miscellaneous weapon, 1 armor and or shield. So you go from miscellaneous magic items to just a sword and shield or armor and shield. Is that supposed to be magic sword, magic shield, or what? I don't know if that's a typo. It's just weird.
Oh yeah, that is weird. I assume that would use something magical, but it doesn't say that.
Yeah, because you roll to get an armor and or shield, you have to roll a 98, 99, or 100, which is like 3%. So you would think maybe that's a typo. I would definitely make it magic if I was running this.
There is an interesting piece in 17A with this weird abandoned temple, which, the weird abandoned temple, you're like, okay, well, that should be something really interesting. And it's really just a temple where if you touch things, you may have the effects of a scarab of insanity to appear upon the altar.
Yeah, there's no history of what this temple was or...
Yeah. So that's also a little bit like, oh, here's this really mysterious temple. It causes insanity. Okay.
Yeah, and disclaimer, I do know, at the beginning of the adventure it says hey, you should fill out some details, but it would be nice to give some background for this. Make this, I would, if I was running this, I would make this related to the Drow. somehow, like whatever this is.
Right. Yeah.
Like, hey, you go in and you see that this is a abandoned temple, but there's like a bunch of Drow related stuff that is here now that's new or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Something to make it a little bit more like, hey, maybe this is one of the reasons why the Drow are here, because this mysterious temple's here and it does something for them. Maybe it was a temple of Loth, or, I don't know, whatever. Yeah, I got a million ideas for that.
And yeah, so just kind of going on here. I'm just going to go to page 8, unless there's anything else you wanted to talk about.
No, I'm good. Let's go to page 8.
So here's a repeat. So page 8, here's a repeat Gary Gygax thing. There's a wine cellar that. So there's wine. There's a wine cellar. There is 11 big barrels of various kegs, and there's in another segment I'm going to start for Gary Gygax Adventures. It's called Gary made me look up something in the dictionary. So in this episode of Gary made me look up something in the dictionary, there are 13 tons, TUNS, which I think that's how that's said.
Yeah.
Hey Google, how is that said?
Ton.
Okay, thanks. So if you drink from these wines, if you taste it, there is a 75% probable that the taster will continue to quaff it until in a drunken stupor. So once again, like wine that you irresistibly can't drink, even though it's not magic, you just drink it like a Looney Tunes character.
It's also, the market value is very high on this alcohol. So it tastes so good. So it's 200 to 800 GP per quart, and you have 5 gallons. So
yeah, and if you are skipping episodes of this podcast, or skipping around and listening to ones that you have heard before, adventures you're familiar with or whatever, and you don't know what I'm talking about, the Caves of Chaos in Keep on the Borderlands has a wine cellar room like this, where there is a percentage chance that your character just drinks and doesn't stop and just keeps going and going and going. Even though they're not magical, there's no like thing compelling you to drink this. It's just like a goof, I suppose.
I do want to point out that like just the stone giant miners have 14,230 gold pieces just in their room. Just 3 hill giants, and that seems like a lot of money.
Right, and the funny thing about this, I do have a note that this is so much gold, but like the thing about that is every time so you go in this room, you make it here, you and your cool elven friend and dwarf friend that you kill these stone giants, and you take all their gold, and then there's a pause because the DM is like, yeah, there's 14,230 gold pieces. You've spent 3 rounds counting it. Let me roll for random encounters. Okay, you're good. And then the players presumably have to be like, okay, how are we splitting this up? Because like we have to figure out how much we're holding. I presume that people used encumbrance back then because this game was very obsessed with realism.
Yeah, it almost feels like half the time you're not going. Like, obviously, there's room 11, which is the most important room, and you're probably gonna have to rest after dealing with however you deal with that room. Maybe several times, I don't know. But I also feel like you're going to rest in that cave just because you have so much gold, and so many magic items and so much magical stuff that you have to go back and just store to the cave, and then come back for the rest. Maybe you take because I guess we can keep going into the room, because as you go through the rooms, like just the minor treasure room has 27,000 silver pieces.
You're going to be, and excuse the millennial reference here, but you're going to be Scrooge McDuck from DuckTales diving into your gold and swimming around because you have so much of it.
Yeah, we're not, just so the reader knows, that's not all the treasure that's here. It's like all those other rooms that we've been skipping over, they all have tons of money in them. Like there's all this money. There's such an obsessive amount of money and gold, and so much of this prose is just talking about how much money is in the room, and items and things and potions and whatever. So yeah, it's pretty brutal how much treasure is in here. Just the minor treasure room.
So I think what the designer might be trying to do is showing how giants display wealth differently than other things. Like they just have a bunch of money and they just wear things that are worth a bunch of money. They don't and they just leave money in their rooms. They don't have like a dragon's treasure hoard or anything like that. Like it seems like they have like a different relationship with coins and stuff than other monsters, which is kind of cool, but that, you know, it doesn't explicitly tell you that. I guess that's maybe me looking into it too far, but it seems like it like that anyways. Sorry, one of the reasons that my like brain kind of stopped there is because I was looking down on page 7, and I can't believe I didn't notice this before. On page 7, the torture chamber in 15, at least in my physical book, the font changes.
Yeah. The font is different on mine as well.
Okay, so it says the large area contains various implements for torturing prisoners, large and small. There, font change on the next line, are an Iron Maiden, 2 racks, thumb screws, iron boots, chains, whips, branding irons, strapados.
Oh, strapados. We got another thing to look up.
Another segment in this is segment 2, and Gary Gygax made me look up a word. I guess I'll do some post-editing magic on what that is.
Stop time.
It is actually pronounced strapado, and it is a form of torture that involves tying someone's arms behind their back and then raising them so that they hang with their arms stretched above their head. It is an incredibly awful form of torture that causes intense internal injury, and I hated having to look it up. Back to the podcast.
Time begins to move.
And then it says a fire put in, and it's 2 lines specifically. So I wonder if, like, in the editing, they actually, like, pasted over this and then rewrote it on the typewriter in a different font. Like, there was a typo here that they had to fix or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Because I think, like, publishing back then, they actually had they didn't have, like, a digital file, so they actually typed it out, so.
No. Yeah, no, this is typed out and then, like, sort of, you know, mimeographed or whatever.
Yeah, so that's my brain's. I can't believe I didn't notice that before. I must have, like, stopped reading and then came back and skipped that room or something, because I am ridiculously sensitive to fonts. So
you are. So I do want to, in the minor treasure room, which I've talked about before, about how much gold is in there. The silver pieces do have a blade trap. I don't know. I guess you could disarm it if you have a thief. I don't know how that works. I forget how that works from first edition. But my favorite part of that is chopping off a member on a score of 20. So a member, I'm assuming it's like, okay, it chops off a finger, but you get to decide as a DM, like, no, it chops off your arm, it chops off your, leg, it chops off a toe, it chops off your member. Member is also something that, could be, could make a eunuch.
Yeah, who knows if that word was being used that way, but that was my first thought when I read this too.
Yeah, as soon as I read it, it's chopping off my dick? Like, what the hell?
Also, presumably at this level, getting your arm chopped off is you could deal with it. Like, it's getting your fingers chopped off your arm, you could, like, regenerate it or whatever. But so we end the Steading of the Hill Giants by the Chief's Treasure Room, which is a ton of treasure. It's you get magic arrows, a magic spear +3, 2 flaming swords, that are intelligent, because this version of D&D really likes intelligent swords, which is cool. I like that. You find a chain. So you find a map to the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl, which is the next adventure. And you get a chain with a weird black metal and instructions written in Hill Giant on a sheet of human skin. To take the chain, basically make a figure 8, and then each section of the figure 8 will teleport a certain amount of characters to the next dungeon.
Which is actually kind of cool.
So you go directly from one dungeon to the other, even though the dungeons are in radically different places. Which is the thing I really like in Eberron, local designer celebrity Keith Baker. He talks about, I say local, only because I'm obsessed with Eberron and I love his writing.
Right.
But, and by the way, met him at Rose City Comic Con, and it was like one of the only times I was speechless from meeting a celebrity. So I made a fool of myself.
Good.
Not really, but
good.
It's just kind of funny, like meeting like an actor that makes like multi-million dollars and is an influencer and is famous, I would not have trouble with. But like Keith Baker, I was like, oh no, it's Keith Baker. What do I say? I want him to like me so much. Oh my God. But anyways, so he has a thing in Eberron where he likes to have dungeons. Like he basically says like, you don't have to have a dungeon be, you walk underground and there's 5 rooms. Like you can separate your dungeon you do one room, you get on the train and you go to the next room in the other state and then do that. Like he's really obsessed with, not obsessed, but like a lot of his designs, he can have dungeons in multiple places. Just wanted to like to bring that up because I think that's cool that this basically transports you like to a completely different place because the climate's
and also with this chain. So depending on what's going on in room 11 of the upper floor and what you've dealt with the Hill Giant Chief and his wife and all the stuff that's in there, he may have used this chain to move himself to the Frost Giant Jarl as well.
Right. It's like an explanation of why these giants are in different places, even though they live in different climates.
Yeah. So part of this is that like, I forget where it is in the module, but it could be that the Hill Giant, you weren't able to kill the Hill Giant chief. And so he now is going to inhabit the Frost. He may be in the Frost Giant area, or he might be in the Fire Giant area. Because you haven't been able to deal with him because however you did that, which I think is actually kind of a cool thing, that you do have this terrible, awful room and you have to deal with it however you're going to deal with it. And depending on how you've dealt with it, it may come to haunt you, which I think is actually kind of a cool thing. He doesn't explicitly say that, but that is, what you would have to imply from all of this.
Yeah, he does. He does say like keep track of notable NPCs because like if they might flee and be in different rooms. So yeah, I think presumably since the Hill Giant Chief knows about this, could go try to get help from the Frost Giants, and that might be a cool thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you read later on in the module, they said like if the Hill Giant guy wasn't destroyed, he would be in this room. I think that's kind of a cool thing that you sort of have that. I don't know. It's like in that video game thing, or hey, this guy's going to come. If you don't kill him now, he's going to come back in the 3rd chapter. I mean, it's kind of a cool thing. And you don't really see that, unless you're doing role-playing games, especially. So that, I think that's kind of a cool thing.
So anyways, that's the end of the steading of the Hill Giant steading. The steading of the Hill Giants? Oh, God. Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. So that's, what do we think about this, like, module G1, I guess we could talk about.
Well, so this is the first one. It's again, I think it's pretty deadly. It's pretty interesting reading some of the Wikipedia stuff and some of what people talk about, and they're like, oh yeah, well this isn't nearly as bad as what comes next, and it's like, oh, this actually seems like it's pretty deadly for this group of characters. And they're all right. Like it does get steadily worse after this, but for this particular one, I think it could be. It's very dry. Like he and there is a lot that you could, if you're a creative person, you could make this a very interesting module. And very interesting stuff could happen. If you just sort of run it as a board game, I think it's still probably fun from a board game perspective and no role playing. And if you're really focused on treasure, you're gonna love it. Just killing things, you're gonna love it. If you want to create a story that's more than the board game, you gotta figure that out yourself. So it's all right. I mean, I think we both have a hard time with how dry everything is.
Yeah, I agree.
And this obsessive focus on just the treasure, because it is that board game aspect of like, well, I sort of have to win, and I'm going to win that through getting the most treasure. So maybe even with the tournament piece, part of it was like how much money everyone gets, how many magic items they get. I don't know who wins the tournament. Maybe who, there you go.
Yeah, true. The gold might be points for the tournament. Like that would be an easy way. Each gold is 1 point. And I was thinking about this. Like it's really dry, and I think the easiest way to make it less dry would be if I was running this. If I read this adventure, if I was running this today in 2025, and I read this adventure, I would look back and I'd be like, these rooms are really dry and really boring. And I would personally lean into the giant stuff more by making every single room that you go in, it should be this weird alien experience, because you are walking into the homestead of people who are like 10 to 15 feet tall or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, the chairs are going to be giant. It talks about the doors being huge, and you have to have like multiple people open them, so it does a little bit of that, but they should lean like way more into it. Like, I would be describing like chairs are giant, and you can, use them to easily use them for cover and like use them to hide. I would talk about how like whenever you open a chest, you have to like climb inside of it to get to the gold, to get to the stuff in it. Like, I would really lean into stuff being giant, so it seems like a really alien.
Yeah, like the whole sort of Jack and the Beanstalk sort of feel would be really nice here. And I think all three of them you would want to do that. All three adventures you would want to keep leaning into, because each one in theory should be larger, because each time the giants get bigger, so it should be even get more massive every time you do it.
Yeah, so a little dry. I don't know how I feel about this. Definitely needs some tender love and care from the GM if you're running this, I think.
Yeah, and maybe that's the reason why people are so into it, and like really love it, because he gives you all the detail, and you got to figure out like how that detail fits into the greater scheme of things. It's almost like building the module, almost like you have a 20,000 view sort of that's very obscure, and you have a lot of detail at the bottom, and so you got to come up with whatever's in between those two layers, or maybe that's the thing that people really love about it, because they have to be super creative.
And maybe the reason why people like this is because it was written, and I'm sure this was like granted this is like early, right? So, like one of the reasons I love these old modules is because it's like a little bit of the Wild West. Like these designers didn't have, like they had some stuff to go off of, right? Like they're going off of strategy games, and they're going off of like other dice games that they've played, but they're like creating this new thing, and they're like making the path, right? There's not much of a path that has been made for them already. So, it's interesting to me to see like the early designers and how they did this. And I think one of the advantages that this module does have, as much as I have talked about it being dry, it being dull, it being hard to read, the requirement for the DM to dress everything up will probably make this experience like really personal and really memorable for most people that have played it.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Which is as much as we say it's a negative, that is a positive, that whether or not that design was intentional or it is something that happened, I think it was intentional, because at the beginning of each of these adventures, he does make a note that says like, hey, Gary Gygax spends precious page space explaining that the DM should make this their own personal thing, and gives you some tips on doing it. So I think that was a design thing that he was trying to do.
Yeah, I think so too. But at the same time, it would have been nice to have a little bit more information about sort of how to run this if you don't have all those tools already. It's almost like you have to be a really experienced DM to run this effectively.
Right, and I am saying this in 2025 as a person who's been playing D&D for decades, and has a lot of hundreds, maybe thousands of hours DMing. I'm an experienced DM, and the people that were reading this in 1981 weren't. But anyways, that concludes the Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. So now we make a figure 8 out of our chain, and we go through the loops, and we end up in a frosted glacial north somewhere, presumably. And we continue on to our next adventure, which is the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. Okay, so this kind of starts very similar. It says like you get teleported here, or it also like mentions you can ride a hippogriff here, or however you get here, you find a cave that you can hang out in and rest and not really be disturbed and regain your spells and whatever. I know we've had some confusion on how this is going to work in previous modules that we have read, but it does say when the party does retire to rest and recuperate, experience points should be awarded for treasure taken out and monsters slayed. That might answer our question about if you get experience for gold. You will be getting a lot of experience, presuming you're going through most of these rooms and searching them.
Yeah, that's another thing that's sort of like so obnoxious about first level D&D too, is that these characters can't change their ability scores up, so they're sort of the non-human characters are all stuck at this level. So you're doing all this adventuring and doing all these things, but your characters are just staying the same. Whereas, like, the other fighters and stuff like that, all the humans and the magic users, they're all, gaining experience and might even level up during this adventure, even though, leveling up from like 12 to 13 is a lot of experience. They might start getting a little closer there. Whereas, like, all of the there's a lot of like elves and stuff like that, and they just can't change it. And their ability scores, if they're able to change their ability scores, they'd be able to go up. So it's like this weird thing with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons that I've always had a problem with. It's like, well, if you get to play an elf, you're sort of stuck. And this is the module where it's like you feel really stuck because your character's not going to advance anymore.
Right. The way that I felt in Act 3 of Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, right.
Except you can't download a mod to fix it.
Right.
Okay, and then so as we continue on into the Glacial Rift of the Frost Jarl, I don't know if there's anything that you want to talk about, but I just want to bring up the first encounter area is another room in these early modules where the people in it will alert the entire dungeon to your presence.
Yeah. And that also happens in if you don't do it right, the hill giants, same thing happens. So, they're more alert though. So they're ready for combat, and, they're going to go warn everybody else that you're here.
A theme of this adventure is like the tiers of the giants. Like you're not fighting hill giants anymore who are like dumb and brutish. You are now fighting like frost giants, which are like a little more clever and a little better at fighting. And then you're going to go up again against the fire giants.
I think 5 is an important room because it's this bizarre corpses that have lots of magic items and treasure on them. And so you have to figure out how to free these corpses that have all of this awesome and also cursed items and don't throw a fireball.
Yeah, so if you throw a fireball or burn these down, then the treasure is lost for some reason, which I don't quite understand, because I thought magic items were basically indestructible, but maybe I am thinking of a house rule or something that
he just doesn't want to make it easy on you to get these items, basically.
Yeah, which is weird. Like, I wish there was another room that showed like that type of solution would not work. Like, I guess he did with the wood being in the hill giants, with the wood being wet and you can't really burn it. But this is like a whole different module in a whole different place. Like, I don't know if I like this.
Yeah, no, it's a really weird one, and I think he put it in there, and obviously somebody in the play testing or during the tournament just threw a fireball, and he was like, "Oh, okay, well, all that's destroyed then." And it's like, "Oh, okay, well, sure."
There's no like way for the players to. I guess you can like, they might have you roll an intelligence check or something, but you don't have like the mechanical way to like read the environment like you do in current D&D. So I guess they just have to do it and just try it on one thing and see what happens.
So I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into this page, but basically it's the same very sort of dry narrative. There's lots of ogres on this, going up to 13 in the ice cavern. There's lots of ogres, so many ogres, and then so many frost giants. They all have treasure.
We do need to talk about Typo Watch 2025 in 9 to 10 for room 10, at least in the paper edition that I have. I don't know if there's multiple copies and like one was fixed or something, but mine says there was also a rock ledge at about 9 feet height, which has a stone box on it. Inside this box are 6 more armbands and a pouch of 21 base 100 GP value gems. The stone box will not be seen unless it is actively looed for by a creature within 5 feet, able to view something that far off the ground. Obviously, that's supposed to be looked, but lewd.
Yeah, and just for the reader to know, listener, we're skipping a lot of stuff. So, feel free to come back, but a lot of it is very dry. It's just like frost giants, ogres, lots of treasure in each room.
Yeah, we're talking about stuff that we think is interesting and notable, but yeah, there's a lot of rooms that we're skipping. Otherwise, this would be a 6 hour
page 10 has
podcast.
13 rooms, and we're not going to go through those 13 rooms. We're just going okay, that's cool. 11, page 11 has a full page mural, full page art spread by Dave Sutherland, another Dave, which is not, it's not my favorite one, but it's really cool to see, it's like, there's these frost giants basically battling dragons and battling other other giants. And that's kind of a cool thing. So like the adventurers are, spotting this very cool mural and sort of gazing upon it and going like, okay, yeah, we're not in Kansas anymore. We're in the bowels of the beast, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's it's not like a handout or anything.
Yeah, it's just a full page art. I personally am not a big fan of it in terms of its art style because it looks very childish to me, but that is just my own stupid opinion.
Yeah, I get like how I understand what you're saying with how like the figures are drawn. I do think the cross hatching on the stone is really cool though.
Yeah, no, that part is cool.
How he draws the torch and like the light coming off of the torch is cool. Like that's my favorite part. Honestly, with how long all this cross hatching took, maybe he was like, I would have spent less time on the figures because this took forever. My hand is sore.
On page 12, there's the next thing you see, like the reason why I have such a contrast is like Dave Trampier does this Rimmerez and it looks amazing. Like it's so cool looking. And I think that's the reason why I go like, he just has a really grasp on these creatures and, how things look, and it just looks so cool.
Yeah, it does really pop. It does really pop off the page, and it's like this really strange thing. I kind of want it.
I want that on page 11. I want that entire page to be that Rimmerez.
Yeah, and it's like really detailed, and I kind of want to. I don't know, for some reason I want to like pet it, see what it feels like. Like it's so detailed that like I'm looking at this picture and I'm thinking about it, and in my brain I'm like, if I pet it, it would feel like this, which is like really cool for art, right? Because it's making my other senses go off as well. It's like I can tell like how this creature would feel if I reached out and touched it. So the only thing I have on page 12 that I just wanted to point out is in room 28, the snow-covered dome of ice, which is like a similar thing. That's where the Rimmerez is. There's a number of skeletons in the icy den. One of them is a human with a ring of 3 wishes.
Yep.
And a bastard sword that is a +2 giant.
Make sure that you search every room and every person and everything, and because you never know in these in these rooms, what's going to be there. There might be a treasure that is worth everything. So Ring of 3 Wishes, pretty important.
And Rimmerez is, I don't know how much people have run into them, but it's kind of like an interesting creature to put in this dungeon because it, notably, a Rimmerez is like a giant snake-like creature that has fire and ice elements to it. So it like lives in the ice, but it has like a really hot body and like fire stuff with its mouth. So it's like a really cool, like I really enjoy when D&D has weird alien stuff in it, and that's like you go to this ice place and you fight this worm that has like fire blood. That's really cool.
The other thing to note is that, so on page 12 in room 24 there are hill giants who are part of the hill giant faction, and then 26 the special visitors cave has the 3 fire giant messengers. So and they're rich apparently, but yeah, so they also tons of more treasure and everything. So it's like, okay, so that's where you're seeing both a mix of frost, hill, and fire giants in the same sort of area. Oh, and stone giants too. Oh, sorry, I forgot stone giants as well.
Yeah, and they're not killing each other. They're kind of working together, or at least like having some sort of meeting or something. So it is like a hint that there's something going on, and I wish it kind of would tell you to lean into that a little more. Page 13 is the key to the lower areas, so we're kind of down in the ground again, so it kind of is the same. We go through the top, and then we go down into the lower areas. So there is some interesting stuff here, such as room 2, the vaulted cavern, has 2 white dragons.
Yep. Does he split out the hit points? So I guess a large ancient male 56. Oh yeah, okay, so then his mate has 42 hit points. So there's two there's two, it's funny, like just the way he writes this, where there's two white dragons. He talks about the male dragon a ton, like just all over the place, all the treasure he has. Well, mostly it's just how many hit points he has, and then just a big list of treasure. And then there's his mate.
His mate, HP 42 is at A, and then the next. So he's an ancient dragon, and she is a medium-sized, very old female dragon.
And yeah, you got to fight those dragons. So there you go. There's a lot of treasure again. So a plate meal +3, which it's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's in this game with the way the math works.
Yeah,
that's
well, you get to +4. You could have +5 too. There's +5 chainmail.
But like with the way that you roll and stuff, that seems really good. But this game does punish you a lot for wearing plate mail, so that is a downside. Like there's a lot of stuff that electricity works better on you, or you can't swim or whatever.
And I do want to point out on 4B the 6 ice toads, which is those 6 ice toads are the Jeff D's depiction of the ice toad. You fight the ice toads on the very beginning of the whole module series. That's where those are at.
Yeah, I forgot because I was looking at that art earlier and I was like, what is, like, I don't remember fighting giant toads.
Those are the 6 ice toads. And then on 6 has the Ogre Magi, and there's a scroll that offers the Lord of Ogre Magi 100,000 GP in gems. They're trying to broker a deal with the Ogre Magi.
Yes, and this is the, I think, third instance, might be losing count, of Gary made me look up a word. Wassail, WASSAIL, which is a salutation or toast given in drinking someone's health or as an expression of goodwill at a festivity.
Okay.
So Gary either had a thesaurus next to him, or I just think that Gary Gygax had a very good vocabulary. It was actually really, really well read. It's a Gary Gygax adventure when I have to look up words to the dictionary.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so speaking of Gary made me look up a word, there is also, let's see if I can find it. There's another thing that is Gary made me look up a word that I can't even find. Okay, this is page 8. So on page 8 in the prison cavern, there's a storm giantess in here. So a storm giantess, I think, is a fire giant in stats, because I think it goes hill, I don't know where stone is, but I think it goes hill, ice, fire, cloud storm, or storm cloud, I don't remember. But this is, I think, the first time you see I don't remember if we saw storm giants before, but a storm giantess who is comely to those of her ilk and is strong and fights as if she were a male.
So she's really a storm giant.
So giantess, who's really a storm giant, is chained on the north wall with huge manacles at wrists and ankles. A fur rug in the middle of the place bears a table and 2 chairs. Upon the table are heaps of food on golden platters, in silver bowls, etc., set to tantalize her into submitting to the Jarl's will and becoming his Laman. I looked up the word Laman. I can't, unless this is spelled wrong or there's like a British American spelling thing going on, I cannot find this word anywhere. Laman, Leman, Leman.
Yeah, I'm not
sure. I don't know what that
means. But I think it's supposed to imply that, like, or like make her a mistress. I don't know.
Stop time.
Hey everyone, interrupting this podcast to let you know that I did look this up again during the edit. It is actually pronounced
lemon,
like the citrus fruit. And I couldn't find this the first time I looked it up, but during the edit I looked it up and found out that it is an archaic word that means an illicit lover, specifically a mistress. I don't know why I couldn't find it the first time. Maybe I was spelling it wrong, or the internet is gaslighting me and the definition for this was added after I looked it up. I don't know, but I couldn't find it the first time for some reason. So now that you know an archaic word for a mistress, I'm going to go back to the podcast now.
Time begins to move.
Yeah, something's going on that she's not willing to agree. But anyways, he's like, I don't know what Laman is, or Laman, so I couldn't find that anywhere.
This Durance Vial makes her a friend to any. This Durance Vial. Okay.
Yeah, and dude, I just want to say, like, Okay, so just for an example, back at the Dragon Room, number 2, the Vaulted Cavern, the noise of moving the boulder, which closes the place off from the rest of the complex, will awaken the 2 white dragons held within. A large ancient male, 56 hit points, rests atop a heap of treasure. 72,000 silver pieces, 17,320 electrum pieces, 2,966 platinum pieces, 8 silver boxes filled with ivory, weigh 3,000 gold pieces, each value 4,000. Like, I get actual number fatigue reading these.
Yes.
Like, I am sick of seeing numbers.
Yeah, that's what I mean by, like, all of this. There's so much. Some of it is super easy where it's just like, okay, there's 4,000 gold. But other times it's just like this, just on and on and on about all the treasure that's in this room. And you're just like, okay, I mean, do I need this level of detail for the treasure? Like, I want the level of detail for the monsters and for, like, what's going on in the room and maybe what the room looks like. I don't necessarily need, like, so much about, there's 61 bottles and casks of no value, for which one holds 1 poison. Like, do I need to know that? Like, is that important?
I wonder if they're the editors at some point. Like, imagine, like, going back to 1981 and the editors are like, we just can't cut anything. It's just so important that we have all these treasure. We don't have enough room to describe the motivations of the Drow. We need to know how many electrum pieces the dragons have.
Yeah, but I mean, here we go. 27 urns of small value, no value given, and 61 bottles of flasks which have no value, except for one, which holds poison. Which is like, okay, one of which holds a fire resistance potion, and why can't you just list the potions? Like, why do we need all this extraneous things about the 27 urns and 61 bottles? Like, there's various bottles and some of them have potions, like, done. It's just, the numbers are just, it's ridiculous. Like, it just, and then the monster, it just has 42 hit points. It's a dragon, 42 hit points. Okay.
And presuming your players are, like, actually into the loot, that's a ton of extra game time of, like, oh, how many electrum pieces do I get? You get this many electrum pieces. So it just...
I will say, like, when I did play D&D way back when, the treasure was really important, and, like, counting up treasure for a lot... I never was really super into it. It always just kind of bothered me. Like, but there were a lot of people who were, like... I do remember being in a game where, they were so concerned about how much money they had and what the treasure vaults were like and how much treasure they all had, that was like their thing. So I do remember people being that sort of into it. But, all I could think of is like, there must be points associated with the tournament play of having all of this treasure so that you win the tournament.
Right, because then then there's a risk reward, like we're risking a TPK to get more treasure. Yeah, so but I do get, like, fatigue when I read those numbers. Like, it makes me just want to skip. Like, as I was reading this, I was like, why am I having trouble reading this more than other modules? And it's like, my brain, when it sees, like, a line of treasure, a line of a bunch of numbers, I just want to skip it.
No, that's usually what I usually will skip it. I'll usually just kind of like, oh, that's treasure. Okay, just keep going. And then, is there anything interesting?
Yeah, and what you were saying as well about treasure and gold being important, like, I will say one of my like formative memories of first getting the AD&D book and figuring out how to make a character is looking at it and being like, thinking, oh wow, I just made a fighter. I roll how much gold I have. I have 197 gold. I get to look at this page and buy whatever I want.
Yeah.
Okay, if I get a halberd, I can also afford chainmail, but if I get like higher, then I can get like a sword and shit. Like, it was just really cool to me to think about that. And like, I remember other RPGs similar as well. Like, I remember looking at the Shadowrun book and being like, ooh, what gun do I want to buy? Like, so that is important. But man, looking at this now, and maybe we are tainted from 5th edition D&D where gold doesn't matter unless you're a wizard. It's just like, man, why there's just this is really
I
don't
think it's necessarily that. Maybe it is, but other games that I played in where you're getting money and gold, like, it just becomes so secondary because, I think when we first started playing these games, that was really important. There was a realistic, we thought that was the realistic element. We're sort of playing a board game, but we all know now, like, really, you're playing these games because you want to create the stories. And the money is sort of like a subsidiary thing of, we're getting rich, our characters are getting rich, but it's really the story along the way that we're creating that we're really going to remember and we're really going to be into. So that's why, when we look at these modules now and you see all these just lists of items and money, you're sort of like, oh God, okay, well, how does this affect the story? And it kind of doesn't. But, we back then, it was really important. Like, that was a really important aspect of the game. It was a board game. And, I think there was also the aspect of, in your real life, you didn't have a lot of money. Maybe you didn't have a lot of money, especially when you were kids. But now, like getting all that money was super important. And like, I don't have that kind of money in my real life, but in my gaming life, my character is really rich. So we can pretend to be rich.
Moving on to page 14, I do really like I think this is like a really cool imagery, and I kind of want like more of this, is the room number 11, the Great Cavern of the Jarl. There's various tables and benches, and they use caged fire beetles to illuminate the palace. That's really cool. I just like the idea of, like heat, like keeping fire torches is probably really difficult in a glacier, but keeping like pet beetles around that illuminate the room is not.
Yeah, it almost feels like we're actually getting some flavor.
Yeah, like you're in. It should feel like you are impeding on where these giants live, and the world that they live in here is built for them and not for you.
Yeah, and we've been eating money and just giants and apparently frosty caverns that we have no description of, and suddenly there's some description and we're like, oh my God, this is such good flavor, we need it, please, more of this, please. Something that's like, oh, this is more what I want to see.
I know I've mentioned this before, but page 14, we're going to go to our other Gary Gygax related segment, which is Gary Gygax hates horses. 3 fire giantesses and 4 ogres are in the West Spur, roasting a horse over the natural pit fire there, and otherwise readying the Jarl's food.
I did not notice that. That's amazing.
Yeah. Gary Gygax says the thing about horses, he loves killing them. Could have been a pig, could have been a bear, but it was a horse.
It was a horse.
My other note here is so this is where the Jarl's private cavern is. It's not like super interesting. I mean, it starts with number fatigue. The 4 point of this area is filled with a huge table, 4 chairs, 3 wardrobes, 5 chests, 5 trunks, and 7 coffers.
I will say the one before that is also sort of interesting. It actually could have been really neat. And he talks about like this, there's, what's the one? There's a wyvern skin and a rack of giant stag, the teeth and claws of an umber hulk, giant scorpion claws, the horn of a woolly rhino, a pair of mammoth tusks, a pair of mastodon. I mean, it's also just like sort of adding them up as items. It'd be nice to be like, there's this display of all this stuff, but at least there's some flavor there. But then there's also then even more, number fatigue and things.
It does have like a really weird trap. So if the magic shield is taken down, it releases a spear trap which fires straight ahead, hitting on 5 or better, which causes 3 to 18 HP of damage. If the walrus tusks are touched, the Shadu skull will scream "Alarum, robbers!" in Frost Giant until it is smashed. It's like a pretty interesting trap.
And then there's the private cavern, which is all number fatigue, and the Jarl.
Yeah, and then interesting, the Jarl sits at his table. What was the thing about him?
He fights as a cloud giant.
So yeah, he fights as a cloud giant with respect to damage. So I don't think he hits as a cloud giant, but just does damage as a cloud giant. And she fights as a fire giant in all respects.
Yeah, and she doesn't have a name. She's just called Lady. It's always just...
Across the table is his quote-unquote lady. So I don't know if that means like her name is Lady or...
Yeah, it's just one of those things of just like, well, okay. This
his side piece.
There's always this like slight towards women with Gygax. You know what I mean? There's just like always this like, just he does not particularly like women. I don't know. I don't want to put words in it. It has been covered in many ways that he just isn't a fan of women and gamers, and he obviously had a very troubled relationship with women, so, Right,
I can't go back to 1981 and read his mind, but I can read what he wrote, and, you know, it was 1981, so and he was in a presumably male hobby in a presumably male space around like mostly male writers. So this type of thing is like a very, I think of it as like a very like boys club thing. Like you say it when you're around a bunch of men, really realize it.
Yeah.
But yeah, now that we're looking back at this after, you know, decades of tabletop RPG writing, and like I will say I am a person that has a lot of hobbies. I have maybe too many hobbies. I probably have more hobbies than anyone that I know. And, you know, I've been into like various different types of games. I'm into video games. I've been into tabletop RPGs. I've been into card games, like any type of games. I just love games. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a gaming podcast.
Right.
But I will say, of all the games that I have played, the one that has the most female players in it are tabletop RPGs.
Yep. Completely agree.
And, you know, he came from wargaming in 1980s. And I will say of the hobbies that I am into, like Warhammer and miniatures, that has the least.
Right.
As far as like miniatures and tabletop games, it's probably not a very inviting place for women. And it probably was even worse in 1981. But, you know, just reading this, when I like know from my own lived experience that like tabletop RPGs, there's a lot of women that play them and are interested in them. It is kind of like, it just must, you know, suck to read this stuff as a woman and be like, the giantess do less damage. And
yeah, I mean, it's sexist. There's just a lot of sexism going on in this game. And I mean, thankfully, you know, we want people to play this game. You know, we want people to play D&D. And if the turnoff is like women come to this and take a look at it and go like, well, I don't want to play that. You know, I don't want to play this game because it's like if I play
yeah, female elves can never be as strong as a male elf. Sorry.
Yeah, just all of that kind of nonsense of just like, okay, well, yeah, we got to have realism. We're not playing this game for realism. At one point in time, I think, you know, I was very concerned with realism in these games. It was really important to me. You know, that's why I started playing GURPS, and I started playing these other games that were much more crunchy and, you know, had all of this stuff in there. But then, you know, we all sort of came to realize that that's not what's important in the game. What's important is these stories that we're creating. And there's but we have, you know, these sort of rules that we also sort of like to use. And creating sexist tropes within your gaming community just isn't helpful and doesn't help anybody. But, you know, I think, you know, I guess stepping back from that, there's context here of like, this is what it was like. You know, this is what, you know, at the time, this is what we thought. This is what we thought people wanted to see. This is what, you know, we were presenting to the world, that, you know, women weren't going to be as strong as men when it came to this environment. And
right. Even a fantasy fake.
Yeah. Is not as strong. So we just wanted to keep presenting that because that's what we thought the world was like. That's what we thought the world should be. And that's what we experienced, you know, and how we thought at the time. So it is interesting to think that this is like, you know, when I was a kid and I looked at this stuff, I didn't see any of that. I didn't see any of these sort of sexist tropes. I just like, well, yeah, no, women just aren't as strong as men when it comes to physical strength. So, you know, no big deal. We can just move on. It's not a thing. But, you know, but that's also because, you know, it was youth and we're not trying to experience life through other people's shoes and how they see things. And, you know, when you start to, you know, there's a good lesson here of, hey, when you start to look at someone else's point of view and be in their shoes and see like, oh yeah, no, I could see where they're going to get really upset by that because, you know, it really isn't true. And also it ruins their experience.
Right. And you said like previously you said like realism, and I would kind of push back on that in a little bit, in that it's like it's actually more like simulationism, because it's not.
Oh yeah.
It's not like a realistic world. It's a simulation of the world that these people are creating. And in the world that these people are creating, that's the stuff that they are creating.
Yeah.
Because like the word realism is like a little bit of a trap, right? Because if it's realism, then it's like it's sometimes when you read D&D, it wears a realism hat where like it wants things to be real, but then it takes that hat off at other points when it is not convenient. And it's like what things you choose to have the realism hat on, and what things you choose to have the realism hat off are the world that you're creating. So this is like this is a simulation of of a created world. And in this created world, there's like some stuff that creeped in from culture at the time, and what the writers maybe didn't know better, or
it's sort of it's what we thought realism should be, right? Like, well, this is what we thought, and it just isn't. It just isn't. It's intentional. You're just bringing your own societal biases into this game with you, and the slip is showing. You see, these biases happening, and you see like, no, Gary Gygax was sexist, and there's no sort of like going back from that.
And like to me, it's like what is more important for the game? Is it like, that men can bench press more than women, or it's more important to me to have, like, if a woman sits down to play this game with me, not read the book and be like, oh, so I have like my female elf can't be as strong as a male elf. That's weird.
It just is dumb.
Yeah, I think I would rather have the not having that, and just it doesn't matter that female fighter can never be as strong as a male fighter.
Yeah, but it's just that is what we know better now. I mean, we know better just because it just isn't fun. It's not going to be fun for everybody at the table. I mean, even when we're talking about this in terms of just having to have a complete different stat block for all of your female like monsters, it's just like, oh yeah, Jesus, like, I don't want to have to keep track of all that. Like, just make them one thing and move on with your life. And again, like, you go back and talk about simulation. We're just simulating stuff here. Who cares? It doesn't really, we're trying to tell a story, and you're impeding the story and the game mechanics by having these things in there. But we just, in 1981, we didn't know better. And this stuff is just starting out, and they didn't know that that's what, you're just going to turn off 50% of the people who could potentially play this game by having these sort of quote-unquote realism / simulation sort of like tropes that just don't help anybody. But, at the time, when I was at the Gamers Guild in Humboldt, there was a handful of women that would play the game. But, every year there were more. Every year there were more women playing, and we didn't play D&D like this. If we played D&D with women, we didn't go, okay, well, you only get a 16 because your female character can only have a 16 strength. I don't think we did any of that stuff. We sort of started ignoring all of that because it just didn't make sense. It just didn't work.
Yeah, and it was dropped pretty quickly. Like, I think second edition revised didn't have it, so it didn't last very long, thankfully. And just also pointing out the obvious that, like, we are talking about the frost giant Jarl, who is referring to this person as Lady, this woman as Lady, but like he's also like an evil giant that is horrible.
Yeah, right.
But this was just like a jumping off point and just like stuff that we've seen in these modules thus far, and we've read in the core book. So, a subject that could be talked about forever, and probably every podcast that handles old D&D stuff will touch upon it at some point, and we'll touch upon it again at some point, I'm sure. Going back to like kind of what's in here, so this room is not super interesting. There's like a lot of confusion of like the giant is a ice giant but fights as a fire giant, etc. He has winter wolves that will be able to detect anyone that's invisible due to being able to smell. And then I guess this would be a good time to talk about this. He has a scroll of 2 spells, Crystal Brittle and Energy Drain, which are 2 new level 9 spells that are in this book. So I'm just going to switch over to the spells. Crystal Brittle is a level 9 alteration spell that causes metal, whether soft as gold or hard as adamantite, to turn to a crystallized substance as brittle and fragile as crystal. Thus, a sword, shield, or armor, metal armor, or even iron golem can be changed to a delicate glass-like material easily shattered by any forceful blow. So it's a pretty powerful spell. And then Energy Drain, it causes the magic user to open a channel between the plane he or she is on and the negative material plane, the caster becoming the conduit between the 2 planes. And you get to energy drain things like a shadow or a specter or any sort of undead. To me, Crystal Brittle is interesting. Energy Drain is kind of a pain logistically, so I've always ignored anything like that.
Yeah, I played a Curse of Strahd in second edition D&D, and it was super obnoxious because we would get hit by something and we would lose a level. And there is a spell to get the level back, but you go at the very lowest part of your experience points. It's just so super obnoxious. It's just...
Yeah, it's a feel bad, and it is obnoxious mechanically to just like deal with. So... Crystal Brittle, I give a B+. That's a pretty cool spell. Energy Drain, I just F. I would never use it.
Yeah, and the other thing about Energy Drain that just is, if you read that spell, it's really dumb because like you don't get the magic user. All you're doing is just draining somebody, and the magic user doesn't get anything out of it, and they might actually be affected by it. So there's a chance that even then when they do an Energy Drain, they get Energy Drain themselves as well, which is like that's a 9th level spell. Like just cast Wish.
Right, and you do have to get Spectre or Vampire Dust, which is probably not super easy. It requires 3 segments, which I don't remember if that's fast or not.
Yeah, it's just, it's a silly one.
Yeah, and there's a 1 in 20 chance it affects you for some reason, because it's kind of funny, because it's like, is that balancing because it's too good? Because I actually don't think this spell's very good.
I mean, I guess it's good if you want to, you can auto kill someone who's only 2 levels.
That's true, but at level 9, that shouldn't be... Doesn't feel like that would be a problem. I guess you become zombies, but like the other thing as well is you have to touch equal to a hit if melee is involved. So you cast the spell for 3 segments. You then have to touch the creature, so you have to roll to attack as a wizard, which you're not going to be as good as other stuff. As a magic user. So I just don't think this spell is very usable. So. And then also when you cast it and then roll to touch someone and touch them, there you roll a d20, and if you roll a 1, you drain yourself.
Yeah. Super fun, huh?
Yeah. Whereas like the other one is like if they're wearing plate mail, they're no longer wearing plate. Or
yeah, and if you get attacked by an iron golem, you could basically just shatter the entire iron golem, which is pretty cool.
Or you can shatter a door, or it's like way more useful than the energy drain spell.
I mean, the Crystal Brittle one's really cool because it's like you have some crazy armored foe, a king or whatever, who's like in all this like, +5 armor, and you just cast Crystal Brittle and all of their armor becomes like brittle and shoved off. And it's like, oh yeah, now I could just murder you with impunity. That's what I would think it would be good for. And also if you've, fought a giant iron golem, which are a pain in the butt in D&D, advanced D&D. So...
And then, so this is the end of the expedition to the Glacial Rift of the Jarl. So basically, once you defeat them or bypass them and get to this room, there is it's like a door or something, right?
Yeah, there's some way in which you can then go to the fire giant. So, the bar moves downward. Oh yeah, so when it's going to examine the area, they will note a thick iron ball protruding from the wall at 10 feet above the floor. The bar moves downward and transfers whoever is standing on the floor of the alcove to a spot some 50 feet to distance from the entrance to Sonair's Hall.
Yeah, so this takes you to the Hall of the Fire Giant King. So this is to a whole different place. So you go from like a glacier to a volcano.
And the other thing is that there's some iron box there that's totally invisible. And if you do, you can get a Hammer of Thunderbolts and a Pearl of Wisdom, which is pretty nice. There's a Marvelous Pigments and a Ring of Invisibility and a Wand of Paralyzation. There's a lot of magic items in this whole set of adventure, but, there's a lot of really good ones like, there's that Ring of 3 Wishes and stuff like that. So,
also the art on page 15, I don't...
Oh, yeah. That's Bill Willingham. Yeah, that's Bill Willingham, this guy that I was talking about before first. Yeah, he's fantastic.
My favorite thing about this is the bear cub on the bottom right. It's like a polar bear and a giant and 2 adventurers, and the adventurer is like trying to assist this like cute little bear cub. And I don't know, it's just really, really funny to see like a cute little animal in D&D art.
Yeah, and the polar bear is little cub is like ignoring everything, and he's trying to get its attention, and there's a bear about to murder him, which is great. And the Jarl in the background supposedly, who's like, I'll just let those bears kill everybody.
But yeah, it is good. Like the way the art is positioned too, it like makes you focus on the hand of the hero is like pointing at the cute bear cub. So
it's great. Yeah, Bill Willingham's great.
So Kyle, what do we think about the Expedition to the Glacial Rift of the Jarl.
It's fine. It's another dungeon crawl. It's exactly what you said. You go into a room and there's some giants, you kill them. That's it.
It's more interesting than the Hill Giant one, but still needs a lot of work from the DM to really make it pop.
Yeah. That's just like, here's some rooms, here's some monsters. There's some reason why they're all doing stuff, but and they're all together, which is really weird. I wonder why that is.
So now we walk into our magic door and we get transported to the next module, which is the Hall of the Fire Giant King. So we go to Muspelheim. Muspelheim? I've never actually said that. I've read that word many times, but I've never actually said it out loud. Which is from Viking mythology. It is like where the fire is and the fire giants live. So, Kyle, we are stepping into the magical doorway thing and teleporting ourselves to the Hall of the Giant King. We've gone through the Steading of the Hill Giant Chief, and we're now on the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant... Wait, I just found a typo. Page 16. At the very top, the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jars.
Giant Jarls. Giant Jars. The Frost Giant Jars.
Typo watch, yeah. That actually just I was like, wait a second. That's funny. The Frost Giant Jars. That's a really good typo. So yeah, we are now in a whole new place that is essentially like a volcano that is, filled with lava, and it's super hot. Basically we're at the beginning of the adventure that talks to you about like what the place looks like and how to run it. There is something here that I was just like, no. That I basically stopped and it was like, no, let me find it. Here it is. Okay. All right, so under notes for the Dungeon Master on page 16, I'm just going to start like a few sentences before. He's talking about just making the game your own. Use the perimeters given to design your own epic. Be disinterested and be just.
I know, I love that.
I cannot stress that the advice I would not give a Dungeon Master is to be disinterested ever.
Exactly. Like,
I disagree with this so much.
Like, what? Be disinterested. Let them all die. Fuck them. Okay.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you don't Dungeon Master, you should be interested in what your players are doing. You should be an advocate for the players in your game. Never be disinterested. You will have you will not have fun, and your players will have worse experience for it. So,
yeah, come on. Like, what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to win, or are you trying to get the party to have fun? Are you trying to have fun at the table, or are you trying to prove something? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, so when it said be disinterested, I was like, no, dislike.
Silly. The other piece about on page 16 that I want to talk about is that the other two modules, you could sort of go to your safe space without a problem. However, we've already read ahead. This encounter, this whole series is super deadly. Like, it was deadly before. The fire giants are a disaster. Like, it is a very tough module. And to make it even more deadly, because you didn't need to make it more deadly by just adding more stuff. Now, if you want to go hot, if you rest too many times, the fire giants are bound to find out where you live and then beat the hell out of you while you're resting.
Right. Well, you're out of spells and your HP is low.
Yeah, so I don't like that mechanic at all. Like, especially given how I understand having a mechanic of like no place is always going to be safe, but this whole, like, it's almost like you didn't realize like how deadly you made this, and now you're going to make it even worse on everybody. So yeah, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, I don't really see the point of changing it if the previous two adventures were different. And it's not like it's a 10% cumulative likelihood that they're going to find you every time you rest.
Right.
So you might get away with it the first couple times, but eventually that number is going to come up.
Yeah, it's just, and it, there's so much more deadliness and things in this encounter, in this whole dungeon. It's a larger dungeon. It's double the number of pages and double the number of rooms, essentially, and double the number of monsters.
Double the number of factions, too. There's not just the fire giants in this.
Right. So it's like, it just seems like, well, now we just, I guess you need to be disinterested because you're probably going to wipe out your party, and I guess that's what you want to do. I don't know. It seems like I don't understand that mechanic at all.
Yeah, and I do want to note, like, for 10, where it's something like 10% cumulative chance, I personally prefer to tell my players that and have them roll it, because I think that, like, it's more exciting if they do it and watch the dice fall on the table and hope that it's not a 10 than if I roll it and then it just happens. Like, that's not as interesting. So I don't know. If I was this, I probably would. If I was doing this, I probably would just ignore that. I don't see like what it adds, and comparatively to the other ones.
And then on top of that, on page 17, he talks and says like, okay, well, we're gonna, just so you know, every time they retire, the fire giants are gonna organize more and more and make it harder for you to, keep going there. And like, so do you really need to have double that? Do you really need to have them ganging up on you and so you can't get in, so that they know you're there, and it's going to be more complicated. And at the same time, you have no place to rest. If you rest too much, there's a 100% chance they're just going to follow you and start murdering you. So, it's just like, what are you doing?
And some of the other information notes for the Dungeon Master is it does talk about, so the Drow are here, spoilers.
Yeah.
And they're behind the whole thing. And it says, if they learn about the Drow, give only scraps of details from your information sheet. Determine a percentage probability a particular bit of knowledge being known by whatever means is being employed, and roll that dice. So it gives examples of using commune, legend lore, and contact other planes. So it's kind of saying, like, if your players use a spell to try to figure out about the Drow, you come up with a percentage and roll it. And that's because there's no skills or anything like that. And also, I think he really wants this reveal to be, like, really special. I don't know. He's really into this reveal to the point where he's not even telling the DM about it. So I don't know. It just seems kind of weird. Like, I'm going to use contact other plane to talk to my deity, and then it's like they don't know about the Drow. Like, they have a 50% chance of knowing that you come up with. It's just real weird.
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing.
So in the last sentence here, that Drow weapons and armor do not radiate magic. So this is like missable unless you read the entry for Drow in the back. They have magic like weapons and armor that is essentially like the book describes it as a radiation from where they are from that is seeped into their weapons and armor that makes them magic like. And being exposed to sunlight causes that radiation to decay away or will destroy magic like their items. So they have magic items that are essentially magic.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that is because all those magic items are like +5 stuff. Like, it's all +3, +5. So they don't want you to like have these magic items for long. Like, you can't permanently have these crazy ass magic items. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons for it. And I guess the other reason is, I don't know. It's kind of just to make it sort of special, I guess.
I think it's some cool flavor, and it makes me like, now that I read that, it's like maybe in a D&D game I run, I might give out like a magic item that's more powerful than normal, but if it's exposed to sunlight, it explodes or something.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty cool. I like it. But you do have to read the entry in the back of the book for Drow to be able to, because otherwise you're going to be like, wait, why doesn't it radiate magic, and why is that important?
Right.
It seems like it's not a really great detail that matters, but I think it's cool to give them flavor and make them seem like the Drow really should seem like they're really alien.
Yeah, I almost feel like they should put that entry in the Drow at the beginning of this module, or maybe at the beginning of all the modules, so that you sort of read about them and find out, oh, okay, they're this very special elf that were shunned and they've made their own way and they hate the surface dwellers.
Also, it does basically say like, this is going to be really hard for the mapper, so just like be cool about it.
Right.
Just be really abstract. And yeah, so on page 17, I don't have anything I want to go over really until 18.
Yeah, 18 has stuff. I'm trying to read with the throne room and audience chamber. I'm trying to think of like is that important at all. And it kind of just, I don't know. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of words. But it's just more guards, and I guess the king is in fact there. So, you meet the king as soon as you sort of enter there. Whether or not you can defeat him is a whole other deal. Because he fights as a storm giant, and he's kind of crazy, and
that's confusing. So he fights as a storm giant with the sword, a cloud giant without it, but he is a fire giant.
Right.
So he's a fire giant. If he's using the sword, he fights as a storm giant. But if he fights without the sword, he's a cloud giant. So he fights 2 levels of giant above him with his sword, essentially, is what it's saying.
I don't know. That's weird. He's going to be tough.
Yeah, it's, +4 to hit, +6 damage. And then also his stats are all much bigger.
Yeah, and there's 4 other fire giants there, I believe.
So there's 4 fire giants in the throne room. And another thing I would like to post that I like to say about the maps, at least in my version, if you go back, it's like, I don't know what map belongs to what. It's
hard sometimes.
It's not labeled.
No, it's not.
And all these maps are weird. They're like, I just stopped looking at the maps because I don't know what belongs to what. It's not very clear. Like, obviously I could tell which one belongs to the hill giant because it's like a house, but...
Well, here's the problem is I believe the way it worked is the very first like one on there in the PDF, that is the first level of the hill giants. And then you don't see the second level of the hill giants until the very last page of the PDF, which has the, because like if you think about how it's going to be in the, like that first insert will be there first, and then there's another insert with the frost giants. So like it's kind of showing you how it would have been inserted, but it's confusing because it's like, okay, well, the dungeon level of the hill giants is on the very last page.
Yeah, and I have the physical book, and I'm confused with the cover. So yeah, there's the throne room, and then the king. And then we meet Queen Frumpy.
Right.
Is the name of the queen. Which whenever I read the word frumpy, it sounds in my head like frumpy.
Yeah.
Like just a weird word. And then I did also note in the Chamber of the Queen, number 4, the Chamber of the Queen serving maids. There are torches on the walls, and 6 chairs and 3 small tables along the hallway. At the end, there are 4 beds, 8 chests, 2 wardrobes, and 4 stools. There are also 4 giantesses, HP 44, 42, 40, 39, waiting in the hallway outside the Queen's chamber, and 4 giantesses, HP 45, 40, 38, 35, in the end chamber. That is 16 numbers in 2 sentences.
Yeah. There's such a numbers fatigue in this. And don't forget, at the very end, there's a bunch of numbers and how much things are worth. So amongst the 81 pelts. Okay, sure.
And Gary made me look up a word again. Harridan. An unpleasant woman, especially an older one, who is often angry and often tells other people what to do.
Oh, dear Lord.
It is, where is it at?
That is in 5, the Queen's Chambers, a veritable harridan, sly and cunning horror. She is uglier than Sunair, who's also apparently very ugly. So, cool. Queen Fruppy's face is a mass of jowls and wrinkles set in the middle of a very large head, which sits squarely upon her shoulders. Her body is lumpy and gross.
It's gross.
It's gross. Okay. And her skin is covered with bristles the color of her hair. Her little pig eyes, however, are big with intelligence, unusual in a giant. Okay. So she's pretty evil. Apparently more evil and has more description than actually the king does. So,
and she's honestly probably a little more interesting than the king.
Yep.
Yeah. So you fight the king. You fight her. The Chamber of the King's Guard is here. There's not really much. There's a lot of words about. There's a lot of words about this, but not.
Queen's Frumpy's chamber is larger than King frumpy stream, the throne room and everything. And there's tons of treasure, obviously, because there needs to be tons of treasure. But yeah, it's sort of like, okay. And a trap.
So on the next page, though, page 19 is probably one of, this, and there's a tentacle monster later, but we'll get into that. I think one of the better things is the 10-headed pyrohydra. It surprises you. It's very vicious, and it attacks by biting 1d10 damage per head, so it does 1d10 per head on the first attack. And it breathes fire for 1d10 hit points of damage per head also. So it does 10d10 when it hits, and I don't understand if it does 10d10 when it hits, or it hits 10 times for 1d10. I don't think I'm a little confused. Sounds like it does 10d10 when it hits.
Yeah, I believe so. And then, it can also breathe fire. So it's like, I guess all 10 are attacking? I don't know. I'm not sure how that... And
it also says the king beats it and torments it for fun, which is like some characterization of the king being a real jerk. But yeah, that's a pretty cool encounter, even though it's just like a really weird thing that hits you really hard. I like it.
Yeah, and that thing is guarding the treasure cave.
Yes, so there is a treasure cave with 18 chests here of all sorts of magic items and gold. Notably, 7 of the 18 chests are trapped.
If you look at page 19, it's literally a table of what's in each trunk. There's 8 trunks, 6 chests, and 5 coffers, because we need to make a distinction between all of those different kinds of chests or whatever.
Right, and it does tell you, like, trunks are 7 by 5 by 4, chests are 5 by 3 by 2, coffers are 2 by 1 by 1.
Not sure why that matters.
Could have cut that out. One thing that does matter, though, this is a repeat thing in some of the modules, is the nerfing of the thief special abilities. They do not like...
Oh my god, yes. Oh my god.
We do not like the thief having a percentile die to do things. It doesn't fit with the rest of the game. So these blocks cannot be picked by thieves and must be opened by bending bars or knock or magic missile spell. Which is like, magic missile, like a level 1. Like what? Is there anything special about magic missile opening? I don't understand why magic missile opens these.
Yeah, I don't know. And I also don't understand why we have to nerf thieves. Like literally the whole reason why someone is playing a thief is so that they can open up stuff. And they're like, nah, can't do that. It's weird. It's a weird one. But also I just want to point out that we have yet another Ring of 3 Wishes in Coffer 2, or Coffer 1 rather. And a Ring of Protection +3, which is really good. And a Ring of 3 Wishes. Like crazy. There's 72 gold rings, which Erol Otis puts down. He's got the coffer there, which is a great little illustration, and there's all these rings in there, and so you got to figure out which rings are actually worth something.
Yeah, I like how you can see the wood grain.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
And then also I just have a note, like 7 of the 18 chests are trapped. Do people enjoy this? And I don't mean like things shouldn't be trapped, but I just mean like just sitting there and going through, like, I look at trunk 1, I investigate if it's trapped, and there's no like, I guess thieves can find traps, but there's no like real way to litigate that in AD&D other than like, I look specifically if there is a spring mechanism to hit me. Like, I don't know, it just seems like it would add a bunch of extra time to going through this room.
Yeah, at that point it's just like, well, wait, magic missile opens all these? Okay, I'm just going to cast magic missile on all of them.
Yeah, so is that like, is it unintended that it's going to take extra long, or is the design that they want you to stop in this room and spend your time looking at treasure? I don't know. I'm not sure what the design wants to do.
But there's a whole page of it.
All right, moving over to page 20. Gary did make me look up another word, amatory, which is just like related to sexual love. So there's a bunch of giants here in the barracks, 6 fire giants. They typically lounge around sharpening weapons and telling lies about their amatory prowess. So that's pretty funny. They're just lying to each other about their
sexual habits.
Sex stuff.
That's what men do, okay?
Yeah, that's what a bunch of men do in the barracks. So that is 20. I don't really have anything else.
Well, there's Obni. Obni's sort of interesting.
Oh, yeah, which I have him, for some reason, I have him on a different page. Oops. Yeah, so Obni is like the most interesting thing about, well, other than the Drow, about the giant part of this dungeon. He is he's a dwarf who's a former slave that kind of worked his way up and is now an advisor. And he, since dwarves have like a history of fighting giants, he kind of will help you, but he seems like he's a little scared and cowardly in a way too. Like there seems to be a way that you can get him to help you or trick information out of him, or he will run. So it's kind of like really dependent on how your party interacts with him.
Yeah, he's the most interesting thing, so far.
And he does know something about the Drow, so he can tell you that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you don't give him a way out, he will try to fight you.
So one of the things that's sort of interesting about when you're looking at page 20, you have like this alcove with all of this stuff in there and like has a bunch of stuff. And there's another alcove with 4 chairs and all this pieces of paper. And that's where you could find out about the Drow.
And it's kind of, and I do want to point out that the alcove B. So there are 83 scrolls and 367 pieces of paper of parchment. Most are worthless, but the 68th scroll tube contains a set of instructions for the king, telling him to gather forces of hill, stone, frost, and fire giants, along with whatever strength he can raise in ogres, ogre magi, cloud giants, and any other creatures for an all-out attack on the provinces to the east and northeast. The scroll promises powerful help from Drow. It is signed Eclavdra. Eclavdra? That's a repeat character. Eclavdra. The papers are message copies to and replies from various types of giants and others already mentioned above. One says, the fire giant of stone left and left elbow in Dwarfish. So the plot is in this room, but it's in 1 out of 300, 1 out of 83 scrolls.
Yeah.
1 out of 83 chance to find the actual scroll with the plot of the game.
Right. So if they don't say, hey, we're going to check every single one of these scrolls for what it says, like, probably going to miss it.
Right, and then you get wandering monsters. So, like, you don't want to check every single scroll. So, yeah, it's just like really he's just really into hiding this plot for some reason. It's like, what is happening in this adventure? Just allow the theme to be the theme.
Right. It's just that you have all of this exposition about all these things, and then, like, there's 2 fire giants there with 58 hit points.
Allow your players to know things. It's fine. I would skip this. I would just let them find it.
Think searching through the scrolls, you find... Oh, did you do scroll number 62? Did you search that?
Yeah, and honestly, I think it would be better to have spread this across the whole adventure instead of just having all of it once at the end. Just like, maybe they keep running into the name Eclavdra, and yeah, so it just...
There's this mystery.
Yeah, it's just really hidden, and I don't really understand why.
So 17 has Rakshasas, which is pretty cool.
Yes, we do love Rakshasas, but not the Rakshasas from Isle of Dread, which are not Rakshasas.
Right.
They're not related. The actual Rakshasas.
So 21 has this is one of my least favorite pictures. It's kind of cool, but I just don't like the way he draws figures. I know I'm probably going to get guffed for that, but I don't like it.
He does it like very cartoony.
Yeah, it just looks very, to me, like a kid drew it. It's fine.
I get it. Yeah, it's very cartoony, especially like the way the wizard is in the air, and
but it is cool that he's casting spells, so that's cool.
The wizard has 3 fingers. I don't know what's going on with the wizard's hands, but yeah, it's a little bit of a mess.
It feels like a bit of a mess, but hey, whatever. And I can't. It's hard to see who exactly the artist is. It's on one of the wizards. They have maybe a harness on, and there are robes, and it's on. I think it says DES3, so I think that's David Sutherland again. So I think that is David Sutherland. David Sutherland's art, which I'm not the biggest fan of his art. So there's that.
Yeah, this is like one of those pictures that's like weirder the more I look at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he definitely has like a less realistic style and a more cartoony abstract style.
Yeah, sure.
So 22 is on level 2.
Let's just point out that 21, just so everyone knows, like there's a picture and then there's more rooms. There's a lot more giants. Like tons more giants in there. So there's a lot of fighting of a lot of giants. There's like 8 in one room, 2 in another room, 4 in another room, 5 in another room, 6 hellhounds. Like there's so much stuff. Like there's so many things to fight. Yeah.
More hellhounds. Yeah, the keeper and his wife.
So there's still a lot of fighting in each one of these rooms. You're fighting more and more fire giants. You know, and it depends on obviously how you've been searching all these rooms, but yeah, there's like a lot of giants.
Yeah, and every time you go back, you better hope you don't mess it up.
Yeah, they're all going to keep coming after you. So they're going to start making defensive perimeters and all kinds of craziness. So
on the next page, 22, this is on level 2 of this structure. Typo watch. When you roll a wandering monster, if you roll a 4, you get a draw fighter magic user level 7. I'm assuming that's supposed to be Drow.
Right. With were-rats.
Where is this the smithy? That is, where did I write that? Oh yeah, okay. So the starting sentence of room 6 with the smithy made me stop and go, what? So, you might wish to announce that a hammering, obviously of metal, occasionally is heard in this area. What? Okay, I might wish.
Or you can just make it completely silent, and that way they know that there's no smithy there, but there really is a smithy there. Like, I don't know. It's kind of it is very strange.
Yeah, like it's too much. Like you're giving them too much of an advantage or something if you let them know. It just seems like the wording of that is weird. It made me stop and just kind of pulled me out. It's like, wait a second. That's...
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, that's room 6. There's still, again, you're fighting through a ton of, they're fighting through Ettins, some hill giants, which is a chief, and you also have fire giant sergeants, way more fire giants. Tons of fire giants to get through. The smithy.
3 males, 6 females, 8 young. So there's youth in here.
Yeah, and then there's a smith who might be hammering some things. You need to decide if you can actually hear it. And the really obnoxious part is that there's this really cool +4 mace there that he may just like destroy in the lava if you don't watch it. Which is kind of like, okay.
Yep, and then the community quarters chamber. There's 2 large beds, 5 cots, 7 bunks, 2 large cabinets, 2 tables, 4 chairs, 4 stools, 3 buckets, 4 chests, 6 hampers, a crate, and 3 small boxes.
It is like reading stereo instructions. Like, it is kind of like, oh god, okay, well.
At least the Hall of the Dead Kings, room number 1, there's like a bunch of sarcophagi in there, so it's kind of like, okay, the fire giants like revere their dead in a weird, like a way that's not the same as the other giants. So that's an interesting thing.
But the were-rats have stolen everything that was of any value in there. So those goddamn were-rats.
At least that's something.
The torture chamber has a really brutal fight for whatever reason, that even though there's literally a zillion other fire giants, none of the other fire giants have figured out this trick.
Yeah, and is this the room where he'll throw you in an Iron Maiden? Yeah.
He throws you in an Iron Maiden and does like a zillion points of damage to you. And like also throwing you into lava. So none of the other fire giants know to throw you into the lava, but this torture chamber guy, he's pretty slick.
Adventurers hate this one trick, throwing them in lava.
Yeah, no one likes that. Yeah, no one's into that for some strange reason.
So there's a bunch of cells in here of prisoners, and it kind of goes through each prisoner. Some of them are interesting. So, there's a female, an elven female of noble birth. So if you rescue her, she will send you 10,000 gold, which is like nothing compared to the rest of the gold you've got here.
Yeah.
Some arrows of +1 and some cloak.
An arrow of giant slaying just in time for you 2 weeks later that shows up. You've completed the adventure, you're out. Oh, here are some arrows of giant slaying. I could have used these.
And then we're back to another Gary Gygaxism. 8 male elves meant for sacrifice in the temple. They are normal elves only. Normal elves.
Just normal elves. Don't worry about them.
I get what he means is like, they are just like, they're like the civilians of elves, but it's just funny to call someone normal.
They're just normal elves.
A normal human in 3C. 2 centaurs, which is like, that's the first time we've seen them in this module at all. They will offer you some minimal help, some gnolls, a troll who is being used as torture practice, which is like really interesting because trolls regenerate. So like the idea of an evil person like using that as like a way to practice torture is like a really cool detail that I like a lot.
Yeah.
It's cruel and horrible, but it is an interesting like interplay of like maybe this is something an evil person would do to someone that can regenerate. And then there is a human female thief chained to the wall. She will gladly admit to being a thief caught trying to find the king's treasure room and volunteer to aid the party faithfully for a chance to escape. If opportunity presents itself, she will heist as much in gems and magic as she can get away and slip away. But until then, she will actually help the party. So you find someone that finally backstabs you.
A fire giant who will pretend to help you and then backstab you as well.
Yeah, and then there's a Titan in 14C.
There is a Titan, yeah.
Who he's weakened and he still has 126 HP. And he has a poison in his system. So it's kind of like running into a Titan is pretty interesting. So I actually really like the cells in here, like all the different weird people that are being imprisoned, and there's some like cool storytelling happening there. But yeah, the fire giant and the human thief backstabbing you is, I mean, I guess you do have to make the decision, but like generally just don't trust anyone in a dungeon in old D&D modules.
They start to talk about the Drow, like the were-rats will inform the Drow of your presence, so that's a thing. Yeah, I mean, there's more were-rats that have a bunch of armor and money. There's a Temple of the Evil Eye, which you think would be more interesting, but...
So that is actually kind of funny. So Temple of the Evil Eye. So the Evil Eye, the Elemental Eye is Tharizdun. I don't know, it doesn't tell you this in this adventure, but like, that is what they call that god in other stuff. And I just know that from reading that. So I am pretty sure this is supposed to be Tharizdun, who is in like other adventures that Gary Gygax wrote. It is a Gary Gygax creation. And like the dungeon really starts popping off on the next page when we talk about the Drow.
This is where we finally meet the point of this module.
Yep. So we run into the Drow. So there's a priest area with like a weird altar that so basically like if you touch it or living flesh hits it, it will become translucent, and it will paralyze you. And then if you look at the triangle eye that forms, you roll a 1d12. On a 1 you die, on a 2 you go insane, on a 3 you rage and attack your own party, on 4 you get scared, on a 5 you age 1d20 years, and then 6 to 12 is no effect.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and here's, if a second summoning of the elder elemental god is made within the same day, it will do as follows. So it refers to him as the elder elemental god, which is, I pretty sure is Tharizdun. Okay, and then room 12, we go to the Wall of Tentacles, which is a real rough.
Yeah.
So it has 200 HP. It can be harmed by, it mentions some spells that harm it. It has 20 tentacles. Each of them strike as a 10 hit die monster. They inflict 1d20 damage. 4 can strike at one creature at the same time. The wall has 2 beaks, which also are a 10 hit dice creature and do 1d10 damage, and are poisonous. And Drow can like freely pass through this wall, whereas it will attack other people. It's just very, very scary.
Yeah, and basically, like, if you want to run this right, the Drow are basically there in the same thing. So they can kind of come through the wall, attack you, and then come back. This could be a really bloody fight. This is definitely like, oh, okay, well, we just party wiped because of this wall and all this. It's tough.
And it doesn't really, like, you could miss the whole Drow thing. So you go through like 3 adventures that are giant themed, and then you get killed by a tentacle wall that's like not part of the whole Giants thing. So
and you might have, because basically on the other side of that wall are a bunch of pretty powerful, or fairly, 4th level isn't really super hard, but still though, like, they're going to be casting darkness and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Curate number 1, curate number 2, EHPSS.
So if you start fooling around with the tentacle thing there, what's probably going to happen is these guys are going to like come out from the wall. They have tentacle rods, which do tons of mean things. They also have, they're going to cast silence, so none of your casters are going to be able to do this. They're going to be doing hold person. There's blindness. Oh my gosh, like they can do a lot of stuff.
Eclavdra has like Flame Strike and like level 5 spells too.
Well, it's Ipsis or whatever her name is. I don't think we spent a call.
So here's the thing about that. So I had to look up what that is because I'm like, what is Ipsis? And I couldn't find it. And I found the answer in the weirdest place. So on dmsguild.com, where you can buy the PDF of the Hall of the Fire Giant, it tells you what Ipsis means. So it introduces Ipsis Eclavdra. So she's EHPSS it stands for this funky abbreviation. This is a quote from DM's Guild. This funky abbreviation stands for Evil High Priestess.
Oh my God, what?
So it's EHP Evil High Priestess Eclavdra. So he ran out of space to write Evil High Priestess and wrote that and didn't write anywhere else what that is. I don't know how the DM's Guild knows what that is. Unless it's specifically in the first edition of Hall of the Fire Giant and it says it somewhere. I couldn't find a reference to this anywhere. It's only on that DM's Guild page. But yes, when I first read this, I thought Ipsis, because Ipsis does sound like a Gary Gygax name, that Ipsis was a person. Like a different person. But no, that's Eclavdra. So that's like the main villain of the Drow.
So this room is super brutal. I mean, it's just like there's 3... Like there are other Drow besides these 3. I don't remember. I think it's just the clerics. But like seriously, like this is gonna mess up a lot of people. If you play it right. Like if you play it to win it as a DM, basically as the dispassionate DM that you're supposed to be.
Yeah, disinterested. You're disinterested this whole encounter because you just want to like do it, and they have potions of human control. I mean, it's crazy. Like they can do they can really mess you up. Dispel Magic does 50 damage to the wall, which has 200 HP. So you could like, if you figure that out, you could like kill it pretty quick. You should be memorizing a ton of Dispel Magic. Like you really need.
Yeah, and also, if you have a wizard with Disintegrate, that'll take off 100, but you got to know to cast Disintegrate. So yeah, all of that stuff is sort of not necessarily spelled out. And then, all the lesser, and, the 2 lesser tentacle rods are bad. Like if they hit you, if all 3 of them hit you, they will basically take down one of your, they're going to mess up one of your party members pretty badly. But if you get hit by the greater tentacle rod, you're going to be really, really hating it.
Yeah, and I don't think this changed in AD&D, but if you are like wearing it down with spells, you do go last because it's like missile attacks, melee attack spells. So
it's
this is I would love to hear stories of people running into this and how they got through it. It just seems like a mess.
Yeah, so the tentacle wall is messing you up. The Drow are coming in and out of the wall, casting spells on you and doing all sorts of crazy stuff to you. So this is gonna be a tough fight.
Okay, and then I don't really have much to go through. There's frost giants in here. There's 6 frost giants, 2 cloud giants in the next rooms, 18 troll guards, 42 gnolls.
Oh, did I mention that Clava has a -8 armor class?
Yeah, she's nuts. She's like Gary Gygax's
yeah. Here we go with all the
like
trolls.
DM and PC. She does show up in multiple things, so I think he really likes that character.
So the guest chamber may have the Jarl from the Frost Giant thing, and then you have 2 cloud giants, which aren't easy to fight around. And then,
but notably, the guest chamber also has 2 very large beds, 2 wardrobes, 2 small tables, a large table, 2 chairs, 2 stools, 2 buckets, a cabinet, a bench, and 4 chests.
Yeah, thank God. You didn't mention the tapestries, the rugs, and the heights of the floor, and the furs of the beds. Jeez.
Oh, geez.
What are you thinking?
Can I fit that in my bag of holding? Oh, wait, my bag of holding is filled with coins and gems. I can't fit a tapestry in here. Yeah. I'm going to use the tapestry to put the gems in it and hold it.
Yeah, so there's 18 trolls. You got to fight 18 trolls, because that's easy. And then, because if the 18 trolls aren't enough, there's 42 unarmed gnolls. But you can arm them and they'll fight intruders.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is there for you to do something other than kill, but they also are gnolls, which are like pretty horrible evil creatures.
And then there's a third level.
There's a third level. So yeah, it's just like reading this, it's like I do think the Drow part is interesting, but the more we read with all these stuff in all these rooms, I'm just like this module, like I know D&D and AD&D runs way faster than modern D&D, but I'm like, does this take like 12-hour days to run? Like it is just so much fighting.
There's so much combat in here.
So yeah, we're on level 3.
We've got wandering monsters, which are going to be lots of trolls, and then fire giants and 4 drow. What's like, don't roll whatever that is. A 3, don't. Yeah.
It does. I will say it does make a note that it's like, hey, you don't need to like be chill with the mapper. Like it doesn't matter. You don't need to like really get into the direction of that things are sloping. Yeah, so we eventually get to page 27, which is a fake dragon and a real dragon. So there's a great vaulted cavern that has a permanent illusion of a huge sleeping red dragon atop a mound of treasure. And then in the next room, the treasure trove cave is where the actual real dragon is.
Right, but that's Gorgon. Like they've illusioned it to be a Gorgon. You find out it's a Gorgon, turns you into stone, and then okay, cool. And then in the next room, there's an actual red dragon.
Oh, right. I actually totally missed the Gorgon part. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, no. There's a Gorgon that has been...
It's a Gorgon which has been charmed by the dragon, too. So that's
charmed by the Drow, right?
Oh, yeah, it obeys Drow. So, yeah, it was charmed. Yeah, so that's actually pretty cool. That's a cool little encounter.
And then the dragon, which is like, oh, God.
Yeah, and then the dragon's... the dragon that also has polymorph others, so he can just turn you into a cow or something.
Right.
So yeah, you have to deal with the dragon after all of that stuff. Keep in mind, you can't go and rest. You can, but it's going to be harder every time you go. And then just a massive list of just like the treasure hoard, which is like fine as a dragon hoard, but like it feels like it's less special because every single like you've run into like 8 treasure hoards by this point.
And it also has your favorite thing.
Yeah, I was just going to point that out. What is my favorite thing?
There's a red dragon slaying sword.
Yeah, so the dragon keeps the thing that kills him in his lair. Interesting. Throw that into the positive energy plate or something.
To search through the pile takes a very long time because there's literally 46,000 silver pieces and 22,000 gold.
Just so much.
So much.
So absurd. Yeah, I don't really... Yeah, just remember, like, the dragon does have spells, so it can, like, go invisible, it can confuse you, and it is a red dragon on top of it.
You're going to meet some drow guard room with more drow. Probably going to beat the shit out of you. Piercers. And then... Oh my god, so many trolls. What is that? That's 56 trolls. So 50, you gotta fight 56 trolls. 56.
Yeah.
You better have your firewall spell ready.
Someone, I want to, like, I want to pay, like, the Dana, the person who did our art, to just draw, like, a comic of me going back through a portal in time to Gary Gygax and being like, it's okay to have a room without a ton of monsters in it, Mr. Gygax. It's fine. It's okay. You know, this is important foundational work, but, you know, reading it, it's kind of like, oh, geez, like, this is a real slog at the end. And especially because you're like, I don't know if the next room is going to have a bunch of magic-using stuff that will really suck to fight.
Or a dragon.
On page 28, there is a thing that I really do love. So there's the Grey Cavern, which is like the Drow strong point. So there's a bunch of Drow here of various different strengths, and one of them is a fighter magic user of 4th and 6th level with a wand of viscid globs.
Oh my god, that whole viscous glob thing. This is so bizarre.
I love this. I'm putting this in a D&D game at some point. So it has 79 charges. Each blob covers an area of 4 square feet with a gummy substance, which adheres various things together. Hands to items, items held, arms to shield, members to bodies. That is... whatever is covered by it will stick permanently to any other object. It is cut by alcohol However, the wand has a range of... that's inches. 6 inches, The bond of the blob is stronger than the substances bonded, and very strong creatures will tear themselves apart trying to get free if something.
You exert too much force, basically. Like you're a really strong fighter who's like trying to rip himself out of there, or is ripping other people out of there. He's ripping those people apart.
Yeah, so I do love that wand. The other thing that is notable is like a very interesting thing that he kind of this kind of glosses over. But so there are 9 female drow, and then there's a female drow here named Nedeline.
Yeah, Nedeline.
And she's a cleric fighter who is opposed to a Klavdra. So there's like infighting in the drow. And I wish he kind of like went into that a little more, because that's like a really interesting political thing that you could put in this that it doesn't really talk about much. Like, that's really interesting that there's the drow are like doing this thing, but there's 2 factions of them essentially.
Like, did you ever read any of the like Menzo Baranzan, Drizzt Darden novels or any of that stuff?
No, I never did. I've read some of the Dragonlance books. I never really read any Forgotten Realms stuff, and I like the drow, but I'm not.
I read all those books, and like if you read all the stuff that's going on there, every single house and like in Vault of the Drow, they sort of talk about this too, about how like each of the houses on each of the people, they're all fighting each other. Like there's a lot of backstabbing and, you know, killing of each other. All the houses are different like levels and stuff like that. So he's laying that groundwork here and saying like, hey, yeah, they're all sort of hate each other and sort of backstab each other. They just also unite against a common enemy sometimes.
Yeah. So towards the end of this adventure, this is basically it. The climax is that you fight the drow. You kind of fight the king at the very beginning, and then you fight the drow, who are the true villain. So this is special note to the dungeon master. If your players have enjoyed these scenarios and you intend to continue it with the balance of the modules which follow, the party will find an adamantine tube when they search Area 20, a scroll and a map accidentally dropped by one of the fleeing noble drow. The scroll contains a wish spell. The wish is a continuation of the drow escape route, showing a vast maze of passages on a large scale. There are 3 cryptic areas on it, which could indicate the whereabouts of vast subterranean cities or other strange places which are far deeper than any dungeon known. This map will be included for your players in the next module, Descent into the Depths of the Earth. Advanced D&D module D1-2.
Which then leads to D3, which then leads to the Queen of Doomweb's Fighters.
So, yeah, that's a whole lot of giant killing. You've committed a lot of giant killing there. And then it talks about the drow, which like I think you should read before starting this at the very beginning.
I mean, it's 2 pages, so there's like this whole thing is 30 pages long, right? And so this talking about the drow is like a page and a half of a 30-page thing. So like, yeah, that should be. I mean, it should say like, hey, go read about the drow first. Those are the big bads, like you said. Understand how they think, and that'll flavor the whole module, or should at least. So
the way I always read modules is I read the whole thing. So I think it expects you to do that. And then also, we just skipped over it, but there are mind flayers here too.
Oh yeah, right. I forgot about that.
But it mentions the mind flayers are basically here because the drow are kind of enemies of theirs, and they're like, "What are the drow doing? Let's take a look." So Kyle, we're at the end of a pretty giant module, three modules in a row. We've killed all of giant kind, and we've looted 5 nations worth of gold.
Oh my god.
Now that we've read through this again, what is your overall? How are you feeling about Against the Giants now that you know about it?
I mean, I low-key hate it. I mean, I understand why people loved it, and I understand why. I think because it's just there's so much to it. I think that it would be fun, and I'm sure it was fun back then. I'm sure it would be fun now. I'm sure the newer versions of it are pretty interesting. But yeah, there's just so much combat and dry prose with just nothing to sort of give you some creative like juices. They're there, but you really have to sort of scour for them rather than sort of being some obvious things that would be really nice to have. This
The DM really has to work to get this.
This is like I said, like this is a bunch of detail that you can use to make your story, rather than being the reverse, which I think, most of the time we sort of want the details to be up to somebody else to do, rather than just the more of like, what is the design and what is the goal here. But this is definitely something you could sit down at a tournament. I don't know how you would get all 3 of these modules through a tournament, but yeah, you could do one of these, I think, and then get through a tournament. The first 2, I think, you could easily get through a 4-hour session, maybe an 8-hour session, or break it up twice or something like that. But this last one, like, there's no way you can get through that, in a short period of time.
I think the expectation as well is that you probably get as far as you can and wipe, and then how much what's your score? I don't think that this, as far as tournament, like, I would be very curious. Like, I wish that the results were still around, because I would love to know if there was a group of people that got through this entire thing in a tournament.
But yeah, I mean, but in terms of like the beginning module, I could see where, there's this really cool, like, kind of looking at it through a sort of historical level, and why people love it so much is there really is this sort of like thread of not just one module and you're done, an adventure and you're done. There's this the hill giants, and that builds to the frost giants, which builds to the fire giants, which builds to the drow, and then it's like, okay, well, where are these drow coming from? And then, like, you go into the Underdark and you see what's going on there, and then that builds up into finding the actual drow city, and actually see what's going on with the drow and how they live and what's going on with them. And then that leads you into like, well, they're all being manipulated by Loth, and you get to the end of that. So that, I think, that's where I see how beloved this is, and how you can take this into something else. But it is very dry, and it's hard to read. It's not exciting.
It is I will word this diplomatically and say this is I would rate this the bottom of all the modules that we've read thus far.
Yeah, it's interesting, because it really is one of the more beloved ones. Like, if you go on Wikipedia and look at people's reviews, they're like, this is one of the best modules of all time. And
yeah, I'm very surprised by that. Like, I had like higher
and maybe that's the problem, is that we had such high expectations, and then and when I was a kid, like, I was very excited, like, oh my gosh, there's all these giants, and then you meet the drow, and they're the big enemy and everything, and that's so cool. And all of that is true. Like, what was in my head as a kid was very true, but what we know how we do these modules now, we just wouldn't write it like this.
I feel that Gary Gygax might have maybe the reveal of the drow was like a bigger thing at the time, but I do feel like maybe there's a little too much weight on the reveal, and then there should have been like more of that mixed around, like,
yeah. And supposedly he was either doing like the DM's guide and the monster manual at the same time he was doing this. It was like, so he had a lot of moving parts that he was trying to write all at the same time. So maybe he just, rather than trying to talk about it was really easy. It's really easy if you think about it when you're writing, and just say like, okay, well, let me just put down all the stats, all those monsters, and what the treasure is, and let other people figure out like what's going on with the story.
Yeah, and if every interview that I have listened to for this podcast has indicated to me that at TSR they had no time to do anything. Yeah. Everything that they did was needed to be out yesterday, so they didn't have the benefit of playtesting and as much as they wanted to, or what. But yeah, this is a very weird read. Like, it's like the Caves of Chaos for 30 pages with no keep.
Yeah.
In a way.
It's hard to, I don't know. I feel like this is the draft that I would want to give back to Gary and say, this is a really great effort, but you need to put in more work when it comes to the storytelling aspect. And I think he would probably slap me in the face because it's Gary Gygax, and he would be like, who do you think you are?
Yeah, how dare you say this? But then again, there's no...
But, this is, 45 years old? I mean, this is material from 45 years ago?
Oh my God, this is 45 years old. Holy God.
Yeah, it's 45 years old. It's almost 50 years ago.
It's older than me.
Yeah, I also think Gary Gygax is I think I counted he's 3 years older than my parents. So, he comes from that generation, and so that all sort of checks out of
to me, D&D, early D&D kind of feels like a plane taking off, but they have to build the runway as the plane is going in a way. They just don't have the know-how yet on what to do, because reading this in 2025, it's really easy for me to say yeah, you need to cut half of these rooms and make them more interesting and tie in the actual Drow. There's no reason why, at least in the underground sections, there can't be a Drow or two. He wanted to save that reveal till the end, but I feel it should be throughout the entire thing, or at least you should be finding
a thread,
things notes from the Drow, or weird Drow weaponry amongst the giants, is something like that. But
there should some kind of thread that starts at the beginning that you're pulling on throughout the whole when you're going through all of this, that you keep pulling on it, and you're who are these people? What is going on? Why are they doing this? Why are they cooperating? Why do they have a reason to cooperate? And again, when you read about the Drow, it's just they just hate all the surface dwellers. Well, why? Other than
yeah, and maybe it's covered in Descent into the Depths of the Earth or Vault of the Drow why they were doing this, but it just says that they're ordering attacks on the overworld. So now that we are done with Against the Giants, our next episode, we will be reading Pharoah by Tracy and Laura Hickman, the first adventure in the Desert of Desolation modules.
And I have it. I looked through all my old modules, and I actually have that, my old copy of it.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, so I wanted to do Desert of Desolation, but then I was like, oh, this is 3 modules. Let's do one at a time. So yeah, we'll be reading Pharoah by Tracy and Laura Hickman. Thank you for listening as we led our adventurers against the giants. And join us next session where we go over Pharoah by Tracy and Laura Hickman. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Make sure to follow us on your podcast app of choice, and follow us on Blue Sky at agmpod.bsky.social. Are you enjoying Adventures Gone Mad? If so, please leave us a review on Apple Podcast. Did you play Against the Giants? We want to hear about it. Contact us at adventuresgonemad@gmail.com and join us next time for Pharoah. Right, and your internet is tanking. That's not going to affect the local recording, but can we wait a moment, because you're turning into a robot and your video is all desynced.
So
am I desyncing to you?
So yeah, I see that it's red right now.
Weird. It says that I have 300 ms.
No, yeah,
but I'm not.
Something's going on. Hold on.
I'm not getting any packet loss. Oh, now I have 11 ms. What about you?
Yeah, it's good right now, but it keeps on jumping down. Discord.
All right, maybe we just need to. There's an internet spike. We just need to wait.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect our local recording. In fact, when I listen to this back, it's going to be really funny. Okay, I think we're better.
Yeah, seems like it.
Is your...
I'm going to put video back on.
Okay, I'm going to turn my camera on. Let's tempt the fates.
Go, Craig. It's your birthday. Not for real. Just for play.
By the way, I don't know if I've told you this yet, but do you know, like, you know when you have a thing that you just ignore for 6 months when you should be addressing it? My bed, as Craig is joining. So my bed on the side that I sleep on has been, like, the frame has bent.
Okay.
When I first got it, it was kind of bent in from getting shipped. And I was like, yeah, when I sleep on it, I'm like, you know, I'm a big dude. When I sleep on it, it's going to bend back. It's going to bend back and be straight. And that was wrong because it bent the other way. And basically the top left side of my bed is, when I wake up on it, I'm kind of like at an angle, kind of like sleeping on a pinball table a little
Jesus.
bit. Not as extreme. But I was like kind of ignoring it. And then eventually I was like, I slept on the other side of my bed. And I was like, oh, this actually matters. Like, this sucks. It actually sucks that it just slowly happened and I didn't address it. So I was like, okay, I'll get a new bed frame, whatever. So I was like, well, I bought this bed like 2 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. So I emailed the support for the company that I bought my bed from. And I was like, hey, is there like a warranty or can I get a discount or something? Because this is broken and I need to get a new one. And I just want to know. And they emailed me back like instantly. And they were like, send us pictures of the bed frame. And I did. And it's all like messed up. And they're like, oh yeah, we'll send a new one right away.
Oh, Jesus.
So I ignored it for like 6 months, and the exchange took about a minute.
That's great, because I'm still dealing with my couch. I think my couch is now no longer in warranty, and it's still bending and having problems. And they've fixed it 3 times, and it's still messed up. So,
okay, I have a couch. Do you want your couch?
No. It's gonna have the same problem. I'm probably just gonna have to end up buying another couch, but. I'm just going to suffer with this one. I'm going to end up putting probably some cement blocks under it again.
Okay, because your so like brutalist architecture.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen, I think.
Yeah, so your couch is basically my cat's couch.
Yeah. No, I know.
She is the occupant of it 99% of the time, just so you know.
I mean, I can't.
All right, back to sinking. That'll be a fun outtake. Count to 5.
He's
that's
fine.
Just like
it's my opinion.
That's just like your opinion,
it is.
Man. If Thane is alive, he is here in Mass Effect 2 to beat up Kai Lang and be cool. Wait, is that No, that's Mass Effect 3. If Thane survives Mass Effect 2, he's in Mass Effect 3 and he beats up Kai Lang for you. For video game fans, I just have to drop some more video game stuff. So anyways, all right, Kat wants to be involved in this podcast, and I need to get her off my desk. Sorry, newbie. Did I tell you about the guy in Palm Springs that I talked to that worked for a publisher?
No.
Oh, so I talked to this guy at a bar, and he's like, retired, as most people are in Palm Springs. And, it's like kind of like, hey, like, what did you do? And he's like, I worked in publishing. And I was like, oh, did you... I kind of have to know, did you publish anything for TSR or Wizards of the Coast? And he's like, oh yeah, I worked with both of them or whatever. And I was like, oh, I probably have some questions for you.
Oh, that's
funny. I
never
followed up, but maybe I'll talk to him again and have some juicy gossip.
That would be cool. I mean, it got to be interesting.
Sources cited, a guy I talked to at a bar in Palm Springs knows a thing.
Yeah.
That would be a very of this podcast thing to do. For a chance to escape. I've never said that. It's funny, D&D, you always read words and you never actually say them out loud. So I've always said Thurizadoon in my head. I don't know if that's actually how you say it.